Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 8:14 in our administrative boardroom. We did have a need for executive session prior to this meeting to go over student matters, personnel matters. I think that's the entirety of it. And with that, Keith, if you lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a packed room tonight. Thank you for your attendance, ladies and gentlemen. Additions, deletions, modifications to agenda. I do have one. I'd like to move on. Stand by. So item 8C6. So recommendation to approve the updates to the handbook for EHMMS. That's placed under program committee. I'd like to make a motion that get placed under our policy committee. Our policy committee is relatively new, so as a matter of habit, it's probably been placed in programming instead of policy. Considering that's definitively a policy matter, I'd make a motion to move it from 8C6 to 8F2.
Second.
Motion by me, second by Mr. Lady. Any discussion? All right, that's been modified.
Attendance?
Any other?
Attendance.
Yes, so Jeff, if you take attendance, please.
Mrs. Bauer.
Here.
Mr. Beard. Here. Mrs. Brennan.
Here.
Mr. Galzilla.
Here.
Mr. Gelsinger.
Here.
Mr. Leidy.
Here.
Mr. Plessick.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Weaver.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Okay, I have a stack here of people wishing to address us on agenda items. Again, we have a policy. Please state your name and affiliation for the record as being either parent of a student, resident taxpayer, employee, student, or representative of a community group or bidding firm that we've acknowledged in the past. With that, we'll start with Ms. Denise Bunty.
I'm Denise Bunting, and I'm a resident, and I'm a taxpayer, so let us pray. Dear Jesus, as the new school starts for the students' protection from evil, Lord, be with the school board members, administration, teachers to make wise choices that help students and parents have a successful year. May all be done in your glory. Amen.
Thank you. I'd ask that all people that are present not interrupt during public comment. This is the time for anyone that's attending to take their 5 minutes to see whatever they deem as they want to address to the board. Next, Linda Terlizzi.
I'm not going to say what I had planned to say, but what I will say is the Supreme Court has made it very clear that prayer during school board meetings when there are students present is considered coercion. You need to think about that.
Jeanette Hedrick. I'm sorry, did I get that last name right, ma'am?
I think that'll work.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm Jeanette Hedrick. I'm a resident of West Manheim. I'm also a proud wife and parent of 3 Southwest graduates. So I'm speaking tonight in support of Mr. Vega's 12th grade literacy awards class. I'd like to state the school mission because I think that's very important. The Southwest School District is dedicated to provide a continually improving educational environment through a cooperative effort with the family and the entire community in which all students are encouraged and expected to achieve their full potential, to express themselves clearly, to think reflectively, and to interact responsibly in preparation for lifelong personal growth. The question I ask myself is, how can the family and community assist in fulfilling this mission? Albert Einstein states that education is not just the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. These words encapsulate a fundamental truth about education. It goes beyond the mere accumulation of knowledge and focuses on critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving skills. This is what Mr. Vega's class is trying to accomplish. It is also clearly stated in our district's beliefs. One of our district beliefs is that quality education provides a myriad of learning opportunities that help each student develop confidence, teamwork, and a compassion for others. The Literacy Award class exemplifies this district belief. And as quoted from research from Canva 2024, deep down, every good teacher knows the impact and importance of education. It isn't just about learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic at school. Instead, formal education is about gaining the knowledge and the skills to become a better person and to create a better society to live in. A proper education sets people up to grow professionally, personally, and socially. It can awaken joy, curiosity, and a deep desire to solve problems to help others. Plus, teaching a student can inspire them to pursue leadership roles and positively impact those around them. One of the many benefits of education is that it can broaden a student's horizons, helping them understand more about other cultures and corners of the world beyond the school door. I want to thank Mr. Vega for meeting these high standards of research with his students. Before the school board makes decisions for or against curriculum, elective or not elective courses, consider these definitions. Teaching is an approachable, diverse, flexible process that aims to foster critical thinking, encouraging students to analyze, question, and form their own opinions. On the other hand, indoctrination is a rigid, one-sided process where a particular viewpoint is enforced without room for questioning or dissent. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Helga Anderson.
Hi, Helga Anderson, resident, taxpayer. My daughter had Mr. Vega as a teacher. I have now attended quite a few of your meetings and understand that you are very passionate about parental rights, as is evidenced by your desire to give parents control over the books their children read rather than banning them. I also believe in parental control and am as passionate about my beliefs as you are about yours, even though my beliefs are different. I understand that you're recommending a redevelopment of the 12th grade Literary Award winners English class. This is an elective class, not required, which I believe has been taught for 6 years. It is a class that as a parent, I would want my child to take as it currently, because I feel that it would prepare her for college. The books used have won awards, are written by people with different backgrounds, and speak to their own experiences and how they felt. You can't determine another person's point of view, nor should you censor it just because it's different from your beliefs. In fact, reading about other beliefs doesn't necessarily make me change my beliefs. In fact, sometimes it strengthens them. By 12th grade, students should be able to discuss different opinions and experiences and start to form their own opinions. This will help prepare them for all the different cultures and people they will be meeting in college and or working with in life. Students who have had Mr. Vega as a teacher say that he's an excellent teacher who cares about them as students. He is not using these books to indoctrinate the students, but to help them understand that there are many different viewpoints and cultures in the world, and to maybe help them develop empathy. Most of us have benefited from the empathy of others at some time in our lives, whether we have needed help when returning home from the service with PTSD, needed help with money to pay rent, when going through a divorce, etc. Considering another person's viewpoint through literature is an important part of what I consider to be a good education. Since this is an elective class, no child is required to take it. You can choose as a parent whether or not to allow your child to take this class. You speak about parental rights. but want to make the decision to take that right away from me and any other parent who believes that this is an important class. You are taking away my parental rights by changing this class. It may be difficult for you to believe, but there are parents who would want their children to be exposed to differing views and opinions and believe they are mature enough to handle it by 12th grade. You are taking away the right of parental control for those parents. If you truly believe in parental control, you will allow this class to stand as is. There is another reason that I do not think you should be changing this class. To my knowledge, none of you have a degree in education. Do you tell your doctor how to perform surgery when you need it? Or would you tell an engineer how to build a bridge? Why do you believe that you should be able to develop and revise curriculum for students? It is obvious that Mr. Vega has put much time and educational knowledge into this class. You do not have the expertise to teach or develop a curriculum. This is the expertise of a teacher. Allow him to use it to give our children the education that they need in order to successfully live in today's world as it exists. If you do not want your children to learn about different cultures or world experiences, do not let them take the class, but do not force your viewpoint or beliefs on me. I want our children to have empathy and experience other cultures and viewpoints. Allow parents with other viewpoints to also have control over their children's education.
One minute, ma'am.
remind you-
1 minute.
I remind you that this is a public school and should support and teach for all beliefs. If you truly believe in parental control, and you insist that you do, then there should be no difference between elective classes and classroom books. Allow parents the choice and support the teachers and their level of expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Carrie's Lunn?
Good evening. I'd like to thank you all for my opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Karis Lunn. I'm an upcoming sophomore at the high school, and I am here to speak about the Classic Literary Award winners, currently taught by Mr. Vega. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the syllabus, this class includes the discussion of 3 books. They are Under the Feet of Jesus, The Underground Railroad, and Pushing the Bear. Under the Feet of Jesus was established in 1995 and depicts the lives of children, women, and men who undergo a difficult existence and intensive labor under dangerous conditions as migrant workers in California's fields. Some might draw connections to a similar topic covered by The Grapes of Wrath, a book included in 10th grade honors curriculum, which follows a white family from Oklahoma as they travel to California for work under the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. However, Under the Feet of Jesus follows a Latino family's struggle to escape poverty and establish a secure life in the 1960s, providing a different perspective during a later time period. The Underground Railroad was published in 2016 and follows a first-hand account regarding the traumatic experience many individuals endured, not only in slavery during the time of the Underground Railroad, but throughout American history after the abolishment of slavery. The novel is a powerful exploration of slavery, and it speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. This topic is only touched on briefly during the 9th grade poem Strange Fruits, which protested the lynching of Black people in the South almost a century after slavery was abolished. Pushing the Bear was published in 1996 and recounts the Trail of Tears, the forced removal of the Cherokees to Oklahoma in 1838. The novel touches on teamwork, leadership, resilience, and morals, both at the individual level and as a collective responsibility. This builds upon the similar themes discussed in the book Night, which is in the 9th grade honors class and follows a first-hand perspective of a young boy and his family enduring the genocide of Jewish people during the Holocaust. I would like to mention that despite the Underground Railroad and the Trail of Tears being 2 very significant moments in American history, the Underground Railroad and Under the Feet of Jesus are the only 2 books throughout the entire English department that are taught surrounding these specific events, providing students the opportunity to examine novels and history. Significant time periods is not only beneficial for understanding our past as a nation, as well as offering a platform for unique perspectives to share their voice, but providing access to historical information in relation to the present day issues also ensures that history will not repeat itself. These topics, although uncomfortable for some, are absolutely essential to discuss. Removing classes such as these from the offerings at Southwestern will not only diminish future students and opportunities, expand their education and their understanding, it will also severely limit the amount of conversation around the causes and long-term effects of these tragedies. This class may not be for everybody, but keeping it in the curriculum is beneficial for everyone, both in and outside of the classroom. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Kit Curlin?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kit Curlin, resident of Penn Township, taxpayer and school district. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address agenda item number 1 being discussed tonight. Under the program committee recommendation to redevelop the literary award winners elective class. I'm summarizing because of time, but according to the course overview, it states that in this humanities-based course, students explore historical novels by award-winning contemporary American writers who confront readers with America's traditions of injustice and challenge us to uphold the civil and human rights guaranteed by the Constitution. A curated selection of readings, documentaries, and films in the arts, music, social studies, psychology, sociology, and philosophy complement the course to help students develop a more comprehensive understanding of the context surrounding the novels. These intensive reading and writing experiences will provide many opportunities for students to practice and refine their critical, analytical, and interpretive thinking skills. Ultimately, students will leave the course with a more complete appreciation of America's multicultural history and literature. I don't know about anybody else in this room, but I certainly feel that this overview sounds like a rigorous course. And after reading through the curriculum blueprint for this course and its alignment to standards, I would say it was superbly written. I don't know, according to, our district's website under curriculum, administration and faculty work collaboratively in small and large teams to articulate a viable, rigorous, and balanced learning program for all students, grades K through 12. The learning experience that may make up curriculum rely on 4 bulleted points listed on the website. Students are given the opportunity to develop their unique intellectual, social, physical, and emotional abilities in a way that support their voice, their choice in meaningful learning. These are your words. These are the words taken directly from our district's website. Once again, I believe the Literary Award Winners course fulfills these ideas. So why are you messing with it? Allow our students a voice. Allow them the choice. The district mission statement is also posted on the website, in which it says, the Southwestern School District is dedicated to providing a continually improving educational environment through a cooperative effort with the family and the entire community, in which all students are encouraged and expected to achieve their full potential, to express themselves clearly, to think reflectively, and to interact responsibly in preparation for lifelong personal growth. The Literary Award Winners course fulfills this mission statement. Our district vision says, empowering and equipping all students to create their future and change the world. The Literary Award Winners course fulfills this vision. Our district also has a comprehensive plan located on the website in which 8 shared beliefs are posted. I would like to share 3 of them with you at this time because I feel once again, they are being taught in this course. All learners are unique, can be successful, and are entitled to an education that gives them a voice and a choice in how they best access, engage with, and express their learning. Quality education provides a myriad of authentic, meaningful, rigorous, and engaging learning experiences, which help support each learner in developing the knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed to succeed in a global society. Learning best takes place in an environment that intentionally promotes responsible behavior and decision-making, a growth mindset and risk-taking, and empathy for others. These are your words. on your website for our district.
1 minute, ma'am.
Empathy for others is one of the 8 shared beliefs in our comprehensive plan. The literary award winners, writers class, seems to fulfill the action steps put in place for college readiness as well. It certainly is a rigorous course that prepares our students for college and life readiness. Before you consider redeveloping this particular course, I encourage each of you to review your district's curriculum, mission statement, vision, and comprehensive plan. Mr. Galizella, the York Dispatch quotes you as saying that you were offended by the content of this class. Your students have the choice to decide if they're offended or not, and they should have a voice in this course. Thank you.
So lastly, we have Dwayne and Rebecca, Mail. You have it signed up to speak afterwards, but as we have questions to ask you during that section, I just wanted to make you aware, you've signed up to speak on agenda items. You actually signed up to speak at the end. You should be signing up to speak on agenda items, but we'll prompt you during that section for consideration for your input. So moving on, we're to 8, Personnel Committee, Mr. Smith.
Since it is 6.5 pages, I'm making a motion to approve the entirety of 8A on the agenda. And
Second.
then for discussion, I will hand it over to Dr. Friel.
I'll second.
Thank you, Rich. So motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Plessick. Discussion.
So there's a lot of hiring going on right now at the Southwestern School District. We are almost fully staffed for every position in the district, although I am sure there will be other things coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Most of that is pretty standard, as Mr. Smith alluded. I did want to just draw your attention to one item, and that is, let me look here, number 10. I'm sorry, that would be, well, yes, 8A10, the recommendation to approve the job description, Director of Special Education. Just as a point about that, the job description was included there. This was really the changes going from supervisor to director, and that was sort of in line with some of those changes we've discussed at the organizational chart level. There will be 2 follow-up actions that I would sort of advise at this point. If that approves, one is we will definitely need to look at the organizational chart, since that would be putting the Director of Pupil Services and the Director of Special Ed as parallel positions. And then also I would just recommend for the negotiations committee that there would be some discussion with the Act 93 group, as there would need to be an adjustment in the Act 93 to account for the changes of those positions. So that's just a point to note about that particular item. I do have one other thing. It's not related to the action of the board at this point on these items, but I had spoken with Mr. Smith, and I would request at some point that we have a personnel committee meeting so that I can share some information with you about retention data. I've been collecting some data, as you know, over the course of this past year. I do have a small presentation I'd like to give to the board. I don't want to take it up during a regular meeting, but perhaps we would entertain having a personnel committee meeting at some point so that I can go through that information with you in public, and that you can ask some questions as well.
Okay. We'll resolve to have the personnel chair set that meeting up.
Yeah, I'll remind everybody at the end of the meeting, just
Okay.
that we're doing that.
I'd like to add a thank you to Dr. Friel and his team for all the work in getting our school staffed. Particularly, we've been put in a bit of a precarious situation with the promotion of Wes Winters and then the leaving of Nate. And so in our high school, we were going to be without assistants. And the administration took very great action, what I consider more than adequate, in adding in an additional dean of students and a temporary assistant. And I just want to thank them for coming up with a plan in short notice that I think is absolutely a great alternative. Thank you.
I just have one question, Dr. Frill. Are we fully staffed, ready for next week with PCAs and every position that we need people in?
I do not know fully about the PCAs and paraeducators fully yet. I'm pretty sure, Mrs. Cortina saying from the back, no, we definitely are in need of some PCA support would be my guess. Super close, though. Right.
How do we handle those situations if we don't have the personnel to cover those students? Like, do we try to keep them out of the classrooms a little bit, or?
Can I ask Mrs. Cortina to come to the
Absolutely.
mic?
I'm
She
sure
will be
you're
able
gonna
to
pass
speak
it to her, so.
very well on that topic, I'm sure.
So we already have some plans from some places, we have some staff members coming aboard that just will be finalized for clearances and things like that before the start of the school year. So we do have contingency plans with staff members within the building. And we're also looking at, working with some staffing companies like Maxim and places like that in the interim while we're looking to fill those positions. I think total, it's about 6 or 7, and there are actually more new students that have come to us recently, not even existing. So we've done really well this summer in hiring, and we've had really qualified candidates come. So I was really actually happy with where we're at.
Thank you.
And I should also, I don't want to defer. This is the result of a team effort to get these positions filled. I certainly do not want to minimize any of the efforts of our principals and our leaders who have really just risen up. And there have been a lot of things that have gone on over the last month. So I'm very much appreciative of all of their work on that as well.
I can definitely add to that. The summer was definitely busy and interesting around here. Every time I was here, either to help with interviews or whatever was going on, Mrs. Cortina was here. Her and Lori Winters both, they were just, or Wonders, I'm sorry, were both sorting through, interviewing people just constantly. They were busy a lot of the summer, and there was a lot going on here all summer. So it was definitely interesting to see when there was no kids here and everybody's running around meetings and interviewing people. So it was definitely nice to see.
I have one question about page 2, the first 5 positions that are, there's 4 new full-time autistic support, autistic personnel care assistants, and also another personal care assistant. So those 5 positions are those accounted for within the 24-25 budget? And are those all associated with the LIU take back?
So they are all accounted for in the budget. However, they're not all takebacks because when you have a PCA, that could be the addition of a new student who wasn't here last year. And per their IEP, have to have a PCA assigned to them. And that's what you're seeing there. But we did budget for additional PCAs because of the growth of our population. And these are covered in those growth numbers.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to take a minute to thank the administration for so quickly finding Ms. Broadbeck and Ms. Wilderson to act in the interim as assistant principal, as well as asking our social studies teacher, Mr. Strauss, to come forward and fulfill those roles, working to make sure we have appropriate support staff in the high school is very important. And that's no easy task to fill at this time. So I do appreciate that effort. With that, roll call vote.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Leidy,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mr. Galazella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
All right, moving on to 8B, Finance, Ms. Bauer.
Does anyone want these broken out? 1, 2, or 3? All right, I'd like to make a motion for 8B1. Were you going to say
Mr.
something?
Beard, you want one broken out?
I do have questions about number 2. And same question is, are these actions already included in the 24-25 budget?
So I'll break out 1 and 2 and 3.
Number 2 is the one I have other questions
So
about.
1 and 3, and then we'll.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion of 8B1 and 3, One is a recommendation to approve the contract for student transportation services. Number 3 is a recommendation to approve a contract with Optimal Performance Associates LLC to provide team building and mental toughness for the Southwestern field hockey team.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bowers, second by Mr. Gelsinger. Discussion. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Leidy,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
I'd like to make a motion for 8B2, which is recommendation to approve a 3-year contract with Agile Sports Technologies, AKA Huddle, at the cost of $13,000 per year over the course of 3 years.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Bauer, second by Mr. Smith. I believe Mr. Beard wanted to kick off discussion.
Yeah, my question is exactly what is this doing for us? My understanding is $13,000 a year. The plan is approximately half of that will be covered by teams, the other half covered by the district budget.
Correct.
But which teams does this benefit, and what exactly do they do for us?
No, I believe he sent an email. I don't have it in front of me. It provides game film for study. It allows us to share it with other teams. And obviously, when we're part of that, it shares with us. I don't know if it's live stream of winter sports. Dr. Downs, does that, or Mr. Winters? I know you're at the middle school now, but does Huddle do our indoor sports in the winter? It does not?
And
Okay.
is this something new, or have we
No,
done?
we've
No,
done
we've
it in
had it
the
for
past.
years.
This is an ongoing effort.
Yeah.
Also,
It also allows for communication. It also allows for players to also share highlights, not just football, but other sports, to share highlights, college coaches to help with recruiting, to allow them to maybe get scholarship offers.
And this is already part of the athletic director's budget, though. This isn't additional out of, okay.
Okay,
Thank you for the addition, gentlemen. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Leidy,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
And moving on, 8C, Program Committee, Mrs. Weaver.
Okay. Good evening. I'm going to break these apart individually, all of them. So we will start with number 1. Number 1 is a recommendation to redevelop in lieu of eliminating the literary award winners elective class at the Southwestern High School for the spring of 2025 semester.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Weaver, second by Mr. Gelsinger. Discussion.
I'll start. I do not make a recommendation to redevelop or eliminate the literary award winners elective class. There's a million reasons, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I think that as a district, we pride ourselves on making sure that there are opportunities for every student at every level. We provide PCAs when children need PCAs. We provide math, extra math when kids need extra math, extra reading skills, whatever they might need. And we often, as a society, have trouble focusing and remembering that not only are there going to be children on one end of a learning spectrum, but there are going to be children on the other end of the learning spectrum. This class is designed for the children as an elective who would like to push their education and expand their horizons in a way that is not going to be something for everyone. I completely understand that. I think that if we start eliminating classes due to small enrollment or due to the fact that we may not agree with things that are being taught in them individually as we sit at these tables, that we are opening Pandora's box. Because we will allow anyone, we will set a precedent. And anyone that comes in here with a problem for any class will have the right to tell us to remove it. If you have a family that comes in and says that they don't believe that boys should learn how to cook because it's a woman's job to be in the kitchen, let me tell you, I don't agree with that, but you don't know. Does that mean that FCS is gone? If we have a family that believes that Adam and Eve created all humans on Earth and that evolution should never be taught in any of our science classes, will evolution be gone? If we believe that it is not the job of someone to learn how to weld because that's someone else's responsibility, is welding gone? I believe that if we start nitpicking classes and don't trust the professionals to teach it in a way that is correct for the educational level of the students that are teaching it, that we are going to open our district to falling from having the caliber of classes that it has, because children won't want to push anymore. Be it AP, be it, which we've already seen a drop of enrollment in, be it these classes that challenge them to think of outside of the box, and maybe, as was said earlier, disagree. Maybe they take it and they say, you know what, I don't agree with this. And now I know when I'm out in the public how true I am to myself, my morals, my values, if that's the route they take. You don't learn those things until they're forged in fire. And what better way to put them into fire than to be challenged in a safe environment that is a public education system, as opposed to being out in the public on the street where they wouldn't know how to react or what to say. So I personally am not for redeveloping or eliminating. I think we let it run as it is and let the children that would like to elect the course.
Point of information.
Yes, Ms. Powell.
Point of information. The agenda item 8C1, is that on the agenda dominantly because of the draft date, June 23rd, 2023, unit summary, focus, and course overviews that are attached to the agenda?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The line item, recommendation to redevelop in lieu of eliminating this line item, was this added to the agenda with the unit summary, focus, course overview, draft date, June 23rd, 2023, was the attachments associated with this that are available on Canvas, I believe, are these documents directly why this line item is on the agenda?
Yes, so in talking with multiple board members, and I'll let them weigh in a minute, but to answer the question, what was delivered as the curriculum for this course has multiple statements in it that cause concern for the board members. And that's what was attached is what was presented as what is in the literary award winners class. And that's posted on our website for everyone to view. And it's very clear in there what the course is addressing. And so, does that answer your question?
Point of clarification, as your name is written on the document, is there additional supplementary information regarding the curriculum, or is the course overview and unit summary that's attached to this line item the entirety?
So that is the curriculum. That is the approved curriculum. There are always lesson plans and things that are created related to that curriculum that are not attached to the public-facing side.
Okay, so going back to, thank you, going back to Ms. Lund's comment in particular, I used the resource that was provided back in discussions associated with the middle school tidal wave to review each of these books that were listed in there. So there was a bit of confusion between each of the documents that were attached. I was trying to understand each of the books and how they related to the curriculum. So if I'm understanding correctly, the title literary award winners, even though that's somewhat broad, it is specific to these three books. Is that correct?
Dr. Krum, are you okay if I stay on this one? All right. Yes, that is correct. It is correct to those books.
We'll go around this way, I guess. Go ahead.
So I have just a statement that I prepared about the Literary Award Winners Program. To start off, I'd like to say, obviously, people feel strongly about it. We've received multiple emails today, and I thank you for your communication and your opinions. I hope that we can all agree that politics shouldn't be in school. Yeah, good, good. So it sounds like we're all in agreement on that. So, I just want to read where I started, and I hope that you guys can have an open mind with me as I go through this. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story as I analyze this class for myself for the first time. So, in my attempt to analyze the law curriculum in an open way, the first thing that I did was read the course syllabus. I was excited to learn that Mr. Vega was the teacher of this class. I very much enjoy Mr. Vega, and I visit his class on every curriculum night that I get a chance to. 2 of my 7 children had him, and all 3 of us agree that he is one of the best that Southwestern has to offer. So right off the bat, I was no longer unbiased, and I was in favor of this program. I read the syllabus to begin with, and I see that this is a very sensitive topic. And while I do believe many of these things in history do need to be taught, I understand that there are some subjects in here that we need to be careful about the biases that we inject. This is even stated in Unit 4 about being careful about the biases that are injected in the books. This also gives me hope that this is going to be a course that's going to come from a very neutral place. As I read more and more about the curriculum, I come across many leftist buzzwords like social justice, xenophobia, implicit bias, systemic racism, and capitalist exploitation. Now I'm starting to see that this class may be more indoctrination than it is information. With this revelation, I began to read the syllabus with a little more, a little bit more, and I found some concerning statements. The course overview states that the authors confront readers with America's tradition of injustice. While I agree that America has had some failures, we continue to correct them. And saying that it has an injustice, a tradition of injustice, is offensive to me. As injustice is defined as a long established custom or belief passed down from generation to generation. And America has consistently worked to improve itself. This implies that America is built on and continues to practice injustice. The truth is, America has been a symbol of freedom, rights, and humanity to the entire world. Most people credit abolition of slavery to Great Britain, but most people don't know that Pennsylvania was in fact the first place in the world to abolish slavery in 1780, in our country's infancy, 50 years before the rest of the world even thought about it. That is because a man named William Wilberforce visited Pennsylvania and saw the benefits of abolition and spread it to the United Kingdom and Great Britain. But that doesn't fit the narrative of America bad, so it is not in many, many history books. Perhaps the most egregious example of this one-sided curriculum bias is that in Unit 1, under the acquisition of knowledge, one of the bullet points is right-wing authoritarian thinking. Well, that's interesting to point out, considering one of the many topics of this curriculum is slavery, and that was almost exclusively a democratic idea. Where is the contrast bullet point between left wing? Seems it's not there because the goal is to put America's mistakes at the feet of Republicans, a tactic that the left has used for many years. So with these concerning terms aside, I thought, could the class still be taught in a balanced way? So I looked at the books. Without reading them, it is very hard to judge about some of the, but some of the reviews I read suggested that they may be inappropriate for school. So I looked at the authors. First one was.
Ladies and gentlemen, please do not interrupt board meeting members during the meeting. We politely and respectfully listen to you during your public comments. Afford the same privilege to the board members. Thank you.
The first one was Whitehead. In an interview with The Observer in 2020, the author said, "If I thought Donald Trump were to be reelected again, I'd probably go insane." Another of the authors, Vera Mose, said in an interview in 2017 about people protesting Trump, "I do feel it's good, especially for the students." In the same interview, she also acknowledges that her book was inspired by Cesar Chavez, a leftist activist and a communist. Another of the authors is listed as Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou is one of the most banned authors across the country. And there are many others. And I think it's important to point out that there is confusion about this curriculum. I don't have a problem with the curriculum. I think we should learn about the Trail of Tears, and especially the Underground Railroad. The problem is this curriculum bias? And it is. From what I understand, every author on there has a left-wing bias. And there doesn't seem to be anything in there. They're actually not just biased, they're activists pushing far left ideology. So does this affect the curriculum? Can we have this curriculum without their left-wing bias? Well, the curriculum itself says the writers manipulate their point of view to influence the readers and interpretation of events. It also says that the writers evaluate how an author's point of view or the purposes shapes the content and style of the text. By its own admission, this curriculum is affected by its author's point of view. So I think it's very clear that this class has been built with a political left bias. I don't believe we should promote either political side in school, but considering the district overwhelmingly supported candidates who ran on removing political bias, this seems appropriate. My understanding of this class was it has a focus on writing. And I think that is extremely helpful. We've had comments and emails come in from people claiming that this class has helped them in their college. And I think that we should continue this class. But in its current format, with its current biased curriculum, I believe that it's irredeemable. And I also want to thank Ms. Hetrick for giving us the definition of indoctrination, which amounted to one side and you can't think anything else. And that's exactly what this course is. It is completely one-sided. And I understand that most of you out there, it enforces your beliefs. And so you don't think that. I'm not asking. I say I understand that it enforces most of your beliefs. And for that, you want to keep it. But I want to let you know that in my opinion, it's one-sided and it doesn't belong in school because it doesn't provide a balanced, thank you for that, a balanced approach. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, you can be removed for interrupting the meeting. I don't want to go to that.
Matt, your mic's not on, sorry.
Please afford the respect. I know this is a heated discussion and there are both sides of this discussion. We should be affording each other civility to hear each other's statements clearly without interruption. So I'm asking everyone, hold your comments. You've been given ample time to give, and there's additional comment time at the end of this meeting if you'd like to weigh in after the board comments. Thank you.
So, inevitably today, I do my best thinking or sometimes my only thinking from work to the meeting. And in actuality and coincidentally, a lot of what Ms. Anderson said was in my mind, believe it or not, because my first thought was, this is an elective class. This is not a required class. But student can choose to not take it. A parent can choose to tell the student not to take it. I think, in my opinion, if that information that we just heard from Mr. Lady or that we have heard already about the information in the curriculum was required, or if it was, let's say, in a required history class or a required math class or English class, then I might be a little, meh, let's revamp it a little bit. But because it's an elective class, I'm thinking, do all the students take it? No, they don't. Do they have to take it? No, they don't. No teacher, administration, anyone is holding something over their head telling them they have to take this class. Most students are not going to take this class. If they're not interested in that, they're not going to take it, I assume, unless there's nothing else left and that's all they got left and they're thrown into that class. Aside from that, no, there's no reason for someone to take it if they don't want to. And again, I mean, I can't speak for all parents, but if I didn't want my child to take a class, I'll tell him, don't sign up for that class. So for me, while again, there's things that I don't agree with, it's not a required class. So I feel that because it's an elective class, I can't see shutting it down or revamping it, at least not for my sake.
Any, no comment? No?
I don't have a lot of comments. I've been on the board almost 6 years. This has been a class that has been going on for that duration or a little longer. My son has taken this class. Like him and many of the letters that we received, it's probably the one class that he would point out that probably helped him the most in his college career, as far as being able to evaluate things and interpret them and then write them down in an understandable manner. This is not on here because I requested it or would want it on, and I do not want to change the course. So, I'm a no to the fact that this is here, and all I can say is to Mr. Vega, thank you, and keep up the good work.
Mr. Beard?
So, Dr. Cromer, I have a few general questions about curriculum that I'm guessing you might be best positioned to answer. Or, so a rigorous course in writing, it seems as though any topic area could be used as the basis for a rigorous AP writing course. In other words, these particular topics that we're discussing that are in this particular class don't have to be the basis of a rigorous writing course. We could have a rigorous English and writing course that is based upon any multitude of topics.
That is true, and that occurs in our other courses.
Mhm.
So just want to reiterate,
Sure.
there's 5 choices for senior year English.
Mhm.
So they all have rigor in that.
Right,
piece.
right.
So everything has that set in their area. I think I'm answering your question correctly.
Yes, I believe you are. Yes,
So
yes. Okay. Based on the topic of this course, the 3 topics within the course, I'm wondering why it's an English curriculum and not a social studies or a history curriculum.
It's a great question. It is actually considered or looked at as an interdisciplinary course.
Okay.
So it does pull some information. It's sort of the history of the course. If you have some other information about that, because I did get a chance to meet with Mr. Vega and Ms. Wemzik and Mr. Wallhead for about 3 hours trying to investigate and really get to know and some of the pieces while Dr. Friel was a part of the writing piece. As you all know, I'm sort of coming in and learning
Sure.
and getting to know
Yeah.
sort of the
Okay.
second, the high school course. So this course has actually been around for a number of decades. In this version, I believe it's about 6 or 7 years. And I would say this version, including the 3 core resources that I would share that Harris did a wonderful job of talking about earlier. But in this version, those 3 core resources were looked at. I don't know what was prior to that, but when this was created, there was some collaboration with some social studies teachers having a conversation of what are some cross-curricular things that we can write about or read about and implement the English language arts standards, and also cover some topics of interest from the social studies side.
Okay. And do the three main topics that are discussed in this course, the Indian removal, the Underground Railroad, and the plight of migrant farm workers, are those topics that are typically covered in our general education history classes? I'm kind of making an assumption that they are because they were covered when I was in school, but that was ancient times.
So I don't feel that I would be able to say yes, no, be able to go into exactly what we have in a 12th year course for social studies. So I can come back to you with that information, but I don't think I could be able to share in detail what is covered in comparison to these particular
Okay.
topics. So I apologize for that.
Okay. I made the assumption that they are covered in general history because they're seminal parts of our history.
I feel they're somewhere. I don't know if they would be exactly in 12th
Okay.
grade. It might be in
Sure.
11th grade or somewhere in there.
Right. Okay. So another question I have is, my understanding is all three of the books that are in question here are historical fiction.
That is correct.
So I don't understand why on these three important topics, we wouldn't be using nonfiction to teach facts. I mean, quite frankly, I could write a historical fiction book and, I could base it loosely on real facts and then I could make up whatever I want in order to try to sell a novel. So number one, most importantly, I'm not sure why we're, teaching a class based on a historical fiction book as opposed to a nonfiction. So that's the first problem that I have with the curriculum for this course. Additionally, if what I would suggest in terms of either revising or completely redoing this course, there's a whole variety of topics. If we want to talk about oppression and discrimination and racism, I'll give you a list of topics that we might consider for a revised course. We could compare and contrast the political and societal attitudes of the 1930s with those of the modern Western world as it relates to complacency, appeasement, and anti-Semitism. We could talk about the oppression in communist Russia and the USSR, primarily under Stalin, between 1917 and 1953. We could talk about the oppression in East Germany and Eastern Europe under Soviet communism from 1945 to 1989. We could talk about the oppression of those South Vietnamese persons that were viewed by the North Vietnamese communists as Western collaborators between 1975 and 1995. A slang term for that are the boat people. I worked with one when I was at Fort Hood, and there's another one running for the Senate in Virginia right now. We might study them to see how they escaped that tragedy and became successful here in the United States. We could talk about the current and the ongoing repression of Uyghurs by the Chinese Communist Party. We could talk about the oppression and the economic collapse of modern-day Venezuela under socialism. We could talk about the current political and economic collapse in Haiti. We could talk about the cultural and religious oppression of females of all ages in predominantly Muslim nations in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. And if you really want to see something harsh, take a look at what's happening in the Sudan and the Trans-Sahel region. We could talk about the economic oppression and the exploitation of migrant workers primarily from Southeast Asia and the Asian subcontinent in the modern Middle East. We could talk about the exploitation of entire communities, including children, in Africa at the hands of the Russian Wagner Group and the Chinese Communist Party for the mining of rare earth metals necessary to manufacture the solar panels, and the electric batteries that we've become so fond of. We could talk about the root causes of mass migration from Central and South America, including the human trafficking and the exploitation of migrants, especially women and children, at the hands of criminal enterprises both during and after their migration to the U.S. We could talk about the human trafficking, including the economic and sexual exploitation of illegal immigrants, especially women and children, in the United States that results from an open border and a never-ending flow of unvetted immigrants into the U.S. And we could talk about the violence and the criminal experiences of primarily urban residents and business owners from 2020 to present. So I would offer up, there's a list that could be used for a better class. Thank you, Dr. Cromer, though, for the earlier answers. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. Mr. Smith.
I guess I'll keep it short here. I'm always a broken record on perspective, and we saw a lot of perspectives tonight. I don't disagree with Mrs. Hetrick, Mrs. Anderson, Ms. Lund, or Mrs. Curlin. I also don't disagree with Director Weaver, Director Brennan, or Director Lighty. I think it was a very good conversation, and it shouldn't go either direction as anybody attacking anybody. I saw it, I looked through this and I said, okay, well, Mr. Vega's been a very well-respected teacher for over 30 years in our district. He even does AP English in 9th grade, if I remember correctly. He does a lot of classes. This particular one, like I said, Director Lighty had some good points in there, which are true. You can read it, it's right there. However, it is an elective class. I discuss with my kids what they're doing. If it was something that was crazy and wild and against my beliefs, I wouldn't let them take it. So that's where I did agree with Mrs. Anderson when she said parental control, right? Parents' rights. Yes, it's an elective class. So when it comes down to it, I don't support altering this class at all for those reasons. But I must ask everybody to take all of those perspectives and don't act like, you know, you're attacking people. I thought it was a good conversation tonight. I really did. So take all of those perspectives and improve your mind. So that's the way I see it. So I don't support altering this class at all. I think we need to leave it the way it is and let the parents decide and the kids decide, because I see it as a class that's kind of transitory as to moving from 12th grade to college, right? Into the real world. So I would say leave it the way it is. And Mr. Vega is well respected in the district for over 3 decades. So I think if there was something going on, he would tell us about it, you know, and obviously have more conversations like these. Just don't attack each other.
So I actually reached out to Mr. Lawhead. We discussed this a couple weeks ago. I followed up with trying to reach out to Mr. Vega. I actually am not a curriculum writer either, so I did take that advice of my own person and reached out to him. However, he was unable to discuss the topic with me personally. So I followed up with a meeting with Dr. Cromer and Dr. Burkhardt attended. And some of the questions I had, and you might as well start walking up, sir. He already threw himself under the bus, so I knew he was willing to come back up. So some of the questions I asked Dr. Cromer during that meeting, because at initial glance, let me start by saying I've never heard a bad thing about Mr. Vega. Like Mr. Smith, he's taught in our district for 30-some years. When I read this curriculum, I personally actually wanted to take the class. However, I will say, I don't know if I would have allowed my daughter to take this class because some of the words in this curriculum, without knowing Mr. Vega personally, I don't know how it's being taught. And some of the phrases in the blueprint that was prior mentioned by some of the directors, but glanced over by the masses, was race is an artificial, socially constructed category, often exploited by dominant groups. Whiteness as exclusionary power, right-wing authoritative thinking. It is definitely written one-sided. So my question to Dr. Cromer, and I don't know the numbers either, but I asked him if he could come with how many people's taking this class, how many people were signed up for the class at the end of the year, and that kind of information. So if you don't mind sharing.
I was able to research that, and I was able to go back to 2019. So starting in 2019, sort of this, as I had said before, this version of the course. And from 2019 until last school year, not including what we have signed up this year, we had about 70 students take the course. It was offered one semester, either in the spring or the fall. I don't know why one versus the other, most likely scheduling things, but about 70 students. This coming school year, I checked this morning, and 13 enrolled for the spring of 2025.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for you. So, I mean, a couple questions, I mean, not questions for you, but so here's my concern about this class is if we only have 13 to 14 students in this class per year, are we using Mr. Vega adequately for the class? That's my question to when making this decision. So I honestly think, I mean, how many students are eligible for this class right now, do you think?
Right. It would be, the entire senior class would be open to it, so that's about 340 students, I would say.
So out of 340 students, we have 12 students that signed up for or 13 students signed up for this class. I wonder, ma'am, if you interrupt one more time, I wonder if we actually took this curriculum and removed the one-sidedness, would we actually get more enrollment in it? Because I can tell you personally, without knowing Mr. Vega, I would not allow my daughter to take this class. I would take it personally, but I would not allow my daughter to take it without knowing Mr. Vega. So I'm all about potentially rewriting some of the verbiages. And is that because we discussed this as well. So sorry, I do have one more question. So is that happening now? Is that a possibility to remove some of these buzzwords and possibly get the other side of some of this stuff in there?
Well, I would love to say I would know the answer to that. There's a lot of variables. But the topic of enrollment, when I talked to the high school team, and this I alluded to this earlier in another meeting about scheduling. The question is up about scheduling. I'm learning more about how high school schedules work. One thing that when we talked about with the team about enrollment is where it is placed, and I may get clarification from Dr. Downs. It is connected to another AP course that students have to choose one or the other. And because of where it sits in the cycle or where it sits and is offered because there's only one opportunity, there are a number of students that have shared with the team they would take this course if they didn't take I think it was the biology or music, sorry, thank you.
Once in a semester and it
Conflicts with the music schedule, the way the schedule is filled out. Thank you.
I personally.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Gelsinger. So I don't know. It would be a speculation if I understand what you're saying, but I don't know what the answer to if that would increase enrollment or not.
I personally think if anything, after all this attention, he's gonna start having a wait list for this class. You know, so
Keith, can I
guess-
piggyback a question off of one of your questions?
Sure.
And you probably don't have this in front of you, but if anyone knows the answer to this, our AP classes that are offered to our seniors, and they are also offered to underclassmen, depending on if they've met the criteria, but let's just say for the seniors, our enrollment in our AP classes, if you do not know the exact numbers, I understand, but have we seen a decrease in enrollment in AP classes since the 2020 closing of school in March?
I don't know if that's the case. I think a lot of it has to do with college and high school that we've had in the past 6 years here. We have a lot of opportunities with Harrisburg University, we have a lot of opportunities, it's University of Pittsburgh, a lot of colleges around here we have relationships with. So college and high school has seen some of the AP go down because of the fact that kids, when they take that, they take the college credit. That's a much better bang for the buck when they look at college. Okay, the AP, obviously, they have to still pay for the exam, score above a 3 on the exam to get that, and a lot of colleges can give credit for that. So I think college and high school is kind of decreasing.
And because I don't have a kiddo that's doing, that would be considered dual enrollment, right? Where they can take the college classes.
No, I mean, dual enrollment for their altitude classes, our college and high school is taught by our teachers in the building.
Okay. And are those classes offered in both the fall and the spring? And they would potentially then pull kids that might want to take this class if they're enrolled for a class that potentially could save them thousands of dollars in college the next year.
It could be, but there's so many other factors when you look at high school.
Okay.
It's literally, our curriculum, our course guide has hundreds of courses for kids to do. So a student might be in a music course and they're really involved in music or they're involved in tech ed, and that just conflicts with this course. So they say, I'm going to take a different English class my senior year. In addition to that, this is in the spring semester. We always have about 70 or 80 kids elect for early grad. So that takes about 80 seniors out that could potentially take this course too. So there's a lot of factors in that high school schedule.
A quick follow-up, I didn't want to interrupt you. I know, just one quick. How many students are left with just this class as an option, as an elective? How often does that happen?
Well, no one can take it just because.
I mean, they have to take a certain number of electives?
Well, they have to fill their schedule.
Right, so how often does it happen that their schedule only allows this class?
I honestly, off the top of my head, I can't think. There's only 13 kids enrolled in it this spring. No one's come to my knowledge to a counselor saying, I didn't want to be in that class.
The reason I asked that is because I recently was informed some counselors wind up slotting kids in the class they didn't want because that's all that's left. And I wanted to understand if there's any counting of that.
Not our core, our core English, science, math, social studies. We have such a wealth of,
Right, and this is an elective, that's what I'm saying. So do we
It
track
is
that?
correct, but it counts as an English credit.
It's a core elective. They're not being forced in there, correct?
Okay, all right, I just wanted that clarification, thank you.
Matter of
Sorry to
fact, that
interrupt.
was one of my statements, just so everybody understands, and Dr. Burkhardt, you can clarify this, is one of the things is, it is a lot of parent driven. And if a student, even if they're in the class for a couple weeks, we talked about this during our meeting, if they realize that this class is not appropriate for them, they can quickly remove themselves, even if it's past the deadline to take themselves out of the class.
Yes, that's correct. We always work with the parent. I would turn that back to Dr. Downs, but usually it doesn't take all that long for them to figure it out that this may or may not be for a whole host of reasons. It could be the topic, it could be the rigor, it could be, how they, let's face it, not every kid loves every teacher. So there's typically, if there isn't transition out of that class, it's a few days as opposed to a few weeks. So
What's the minimum students needed in this class for it to happen?
We normally set the cutoff at 10. We have less than 10 students. We say we're probably looking at not including that course. However, there are some higher level courses sometimes that, a student wants to take, a Latin 4. So we'll put them in with Latin 3 and we'll kind of combine those courses together.
try to keep the numbers above 10. Obviously, it's very rare to have, 13's low for our high school. Most of our classes are in the 20s, 25, 26. But there are some higher level elective courses that we do run because of the fact that students are interested in going to college for that, or they're interested in entering the workforce for that. So we include those in the schedule. If it fits, obviously, if we look and say, hey, the English department needs more, ninth grade English courses, they're too full, we would say, hey, we're not going to run that this year because we need another section of 28 freshmen or something like that to try and lower those numbers of courses.
If we voted to reformat, reword, whatever words you want to use, this curriculum now, would there be adequate time to have it done and in place before the next semester?
No.
How long?
Realistically, we would need, because of everything that goes into this, it's not just this stage one. We're talking about assessments. We're talking about overall instruction. It would need at least a school year. So assuming next year or this entire school year. So to have it done for mid-January, should that be the case, we would have to really we're looking at stage one, and once that is determined is adequate, then we're moving into how are we assessing that new learning, depending on how much has changed. Really goes into a long process, and we're running out of professional development time during the school year. We have a limited amount that we have. So in my opinion, no, based on our process.
So if we vote this to be redone for this year, the students of this class year will not have this class available to them. That's a question. Okay. Okay, that's all I need. Thank you. I thought I was done with you, but
I do think there's
lied.
an in-between there. We could eliminate some parts and still keep the class, but that's a discussion.
I would like to add just a few points of clarification based on my points of information I asked earlier. So I reviewed the books online, thinking about the fact that I read the curriculum descriptions in 2023, and I read it again when I saw this on the agenda. I elected to read out loud some of the curriculum to some students just to get their perspective. And what I thought was overwhelmingly interesting was that they were very, very surprised by the way in which some of the statements were worded, much like Mr. Gelsinger and Leidy have stated. And then not knowing what the course was, not knowing who had written the curriculum, not knowing who the teacher was, only listening to the words. I think it's important to note that once they had that additional information, they were very, very surprised. And so in knowing that I now have read these documents that are attached to the agenda, once by myself, not knowing, once in this role and perspective as a board member, and once out loud to others who have had direct interactions outside of myself with Mr. Vega and his teachings, I think that it's important to note that the buzzwords, as have been used, were surprising for people to have in here based on their direct interactions with him in his classroom as a teacher, much like Mr. Leidy was stating, as well as Mr. Smith and Mr. Gelsinger. So knowing also from my perspective that when I was a freshman in college, I chose to take a class very similar to this. It was very directly named. It wasn't just literary award winners. I knew what I was going into. And so thinking also from that perspective, I chose to take the class because I knew what the books were ahead of time. I was very curious how they would be taught. And I made my parents aware, and they read the books along with me because they were very curious about how it would be taught at the collegiate level, seemingly one-sided. And so again, that gives me a very different perspective on this course. So I just think it's very interesting that this has evolved given seemingly just a few words in the curriculum outline. That's all.
So I'd like to start off by um, explaining that the board has a role to do, multiple roles, one of which is establish curriculum and vote on that curriculum. As a school, we cannot teach every topic, not because we don't want to, it's because we don't have the teachers and the time to teach every topic that a student may be interested in. We don't have the room to teach basket weaving in 5 classrooms if you're interested in basket weaving. So we have to make a choice on what classes we do teach in our school. That is our role as a board to do. So the question is, what classes and what topics can we teach that most effectively serves the role of the district? As a board, we are elected to determine the direction of the district. That is our function. We are elected by the people to do so. Your board is overwhelmingly conservative currently. Does that mean that we are going to force our ideals onto the population? No, it does not. Now, in looking at this specifically, I can say when I voiced my objection to this last year, my objection was and still remains the one-sidedness of this course. This course is very one-sided. I was not familiar with Mr. Vega and his teaching, and since then I've had a multitude of people come forward to espouse how good a teacher he is. And I am not going to undercut that. From what I've heard, he's an excellent teacher. But to couple the comments that have been stated here, there are multiple ways to teach effective reading and writing on a multitude of topics. The question is, does this curriculum, is it vastly one-sided? We can have Mr. Vega teaching any number of topics effectively and have students just as engaged and prepared for college. Now, when we get to drilling down on what this course is, I'll first cover, when I first saw this last year, the buzzwords, first thing they were popped out at me as they did last year. I voiced those opinions then, and I'm still citing them. I'm going to go back to race as an artificially socially constructed category. That is 100% fallacy. We record the race as a demographic in a multitude of our systems. It is determined on your birth certificate what race you are. It is very easily identifiable as a demographic. It is not artificially constructed. So right off the bat, the very first understanding in Unit 1 is a fallacy. And above that, they state one of the long-term goals is to reduce prejudicial thinking. According to whose standards? Now, as you go through this, recognizing, addressing racial and prejudicial biases, issues of prejudice, the right-wing authoritarian thinking. I drilled down on that, as many board members have. So that theory was suggested by Bob Altmeyer. Not only did he develop a theory on right-wing authoritarian thinking, which was an RWA scale, he also has a left-wing authoritarian scale with an LWA scale as well. We have only decided to include the right-wing scale. So right off the bat, in looking at this, it's very clear to me, where is the other side to this? In considering what courses we should deliver, if we're going to delve into an area that's politically charged, let's present both sides, as a district should moderately. That's not occurring here. Whiteness as an exclusionary power. If we're going to discuss someone's whiteness, is it fair to discuss someone's blackness? I ask you, is it? That's racist. If we're only presenting one side, it's racist. And that's why I voiced objection to it last year, and I still do. We shouldn't be discussing someone's color as an attribute of character. We are all people, and we decide our own actions. It's not our color that decides it. So it's highly inflammatory, highly racist. We get into Unit 4. Unit 4 is alt-right. The alt-right movement is a pseudoscientific idea of biological racism that promotes the form of identity politics in favor of European Americans and white people internationally. That's the first thing I found on Google as far as alt-right, which we're teaching in Unit 4. It is highly one-sided, and in drilling down where this came from, I am happy to have gotten correspondence from a member that was directed through Mr. Lawhead. She cited that this is part of chapter, stand by. This is part of chapter 49, CRSE. Well, in speaking with Dr. Friel, it is not. However, the standards for faculty instruction on CRSE that are dictated by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, those are verbatim what is on this curriculum. This course is nothing more, in my estimation, than a copy of what the Department of Education wants us to teach. So the Department of Education is deciding this curriculum. And as far as this curriculum goes, their top competencies go right into identifying implicit bias and the multitude of differences in race. What this is, when I go into the basics of it, what I take it down to is this is a race baiting class. What is the race baiting? What is race baiting? When you look it up online, the definition of is inciting hatred through citing prior inequities and injustices to a political end. We are, in this course, as Mr. Beard suggested, we do not cite the injustices occurring around the world to everyone. We are selectively citing only injustices to people of brown and black color. It's one-sided. If we're going to cover injustices, let's inculcate covering all peoples. It's incredibly one-sided, and that's why I'm against it. Now, in moderation, in bringing this forward again, now that there's been a change of board, I again voiced my objection to this course, and I had a discussion with Drs. Friel and Burkhart. And the moderate course that was suggested was, let's look at what's offensive and have a dialogue in our programming committee so we can examine whether this is being taught fairly or one-sided. And that's why instead of up for elimination today, in an effort to moderate, I suggested we re-examine this course instead of eliminate this course, strictly out of moderation, to show that we are not just going to haphazardly eliminate something that we might not understand. Now, in looking at this and considering all this, I'll tell you board members' positions have stratified. There are some that have gone definitely opposed, some that haven't. But the point of this vote tonight is to determine whether we're going to reevaluate this course. And again, in finality, what I'm going to say here is we teach assimilation in this course. There are points in this course that are very appropriate to teach. One of them is assimilation. And as America is a melting pot that takes people from all around the country, and they're banging down our doors or jumping our walls to get in here, assimilation is the concept that when you arrive in a country, you adopt their ways and their flaws and become one of their citizenry, flaws, warts, and all, and are proud to be one of those citizens. What this course does is continually, repetitively focus on the injustices done by Americans to peoples. It is very one-sided, it is very slanted, and as far as I'm concerned, has no place here in the district. But in an effort to moderate, I've suggested that we redevelop the course instead of eliminate it and examine what exactly is being taught. So that's how I'm going to weigh in on it.
Point of clarification.
Yes.
The line item, repeating again, 8C1, says that this would be a redevelop for the spring 2025 semester. If I understood correctly, it's not possible to redevelop by spring of 2025 semester, correct? Thank you.
Can I make a motion to modify the motion?
We don't need to, because this is still a motion to redevelop it for whether that can
But
occur.
by Robert's rules, I can make a motion
Yes,
to
absolutely.
modify the motion to allow this class to be taught this year and give Mr. Vega, that way the students of this class have the opportunity to take this class, and then that'll give him adequate time to update his curriculum blueprint and make it appear as not being one-sided. Because I truly believe Mr. Vega is not teaching this curriculum one-sided, but I also agree that some of the verbiages in this curriculum blueprint need to be changed. So that's where I stand. So I'm making a motion to modify the motion to give him 1 year to do it and let him teach it this year.
So spring of 26.
Correct.
I second that
Well,
motion.
hold
Can
on.
you restate the motion exactly with the verbiage so we can?
A motion to modify the motion to allow the class to exist as is, giving him 1 year to update the curriculum blueprint. And we can play with the terminology later. But I think everybody understands the intent.
Well, we have to get the wording. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. And
So-
is that acceptable?
Yeah.
I don't know what the clicking is.
Speaker.
Okay, so real fast though,
Yeah,
because we,
Can I hold this? Can we figure out what the clicking is that's affecting our,
it's a
it's
speak-
repetitive?
I think it's the speaker.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we,
Can you use we have a
There's a
redundant
spare
mic
there,
on the
Mr.
end.
Plessick.
Not you.
okay, we just heard a little bit about scheduling. So I just wanted to make sure, are we even sure that this won't end up being a fall class next year? If we're going to put this on the table, because it sounds like the scheduling is slightly fluid.
There is a, if I may, there is the curriculum process for next year includes this department. So it was falling under revision as to be expected as part of the process. So if the board votes in the affirmative for or spring of 2026, I think we can make an effort to make sure it's offered then can't, but nonetheless, it will be part of the revision process regardless. It would have been part of the revision process regardless of what the board decided tonight.
Except I asked that question and specifically got the blocks of when English was to be reevaluated, and it was 2 years out, correct?
So there's two different things. So in our curriculum cycle process, this is going into, or we're currently in cycle 4. So cycle 4 is full implementation, and I'm reading this directly from our. Full
Can we
implementation.
check that microphone? Because people are saying online they can't hear anything at that microphone.
Maybe it's banging at the end. Can we wrap it around
Aha,
the,
that could be it, yeah.
can we
Or
clip
take
it
off.
to
Yeah, you
to a
think you're
part of
right.
there, or? Yeah.
But our microphone apparently is not
Purpose.
turned on though. Nobody online can hear that. Whoever goes to that
It's
microphone.
probably from that cord.
Mr. Mummer, is that a spare mic at the end on the table here? Can we just
Right.
utilize that?
To the battery.
That will be heard online, just like all the rest of these.
All right, I think you can hear me there. So let me just think back. Question was. I don't think this is one. Yeah, can you just get rid of that? Question was about the curriculum cycle process. We are in cycle 4, so full implementation of the course. That's in stage 1, 2, and 3. Stage 1 is what we are talking about right now. Stage 2 is the assessment. Stage 3 is a little bit more that instruction, not necessarily the lesson plans per se. In this year, we are always in a revision cycle. We're always modifying and looking and analyzing what can we change, what can be changed in any of them. It doesn't mean that we definitely change things. The approval process from the board is in cycle 3. So if we make changes, and typically it's stage 2, your assessments and your instruction in the classroom. Rarely do you have stage 1 adjustments. You could, it just depends on how it's being instructed, and different modifications. I feel like you have less changes in that year one because you just had it board approved.
If I could redirect though, so that the question I have is, so if a board decides to adopt a curriculum and then the board changes hands, how long is it before the board is able to, how long before a curriculum is brought before the board thereafter? How many years?
So in this, I'd have to look at the calendar. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm going to say 4 years.
4 years.
Of those things. Yeah, for stage one.
So.
That's connected to standards, right, to all of
And
those
that,
pieces.
and you see where I'm going with that, right? One of the board's roles is to establish curriculum. If we wait till a curriculum cycle completes to reevaluate a course, a 4-year cycle, some of us might not even be here. And so I don't find that as a relevant answer to readdressing a curriculum as a board. So how do we proceed with a altered course?
Well, the process is set up this way. Obviously, the 9 individuals here can make a decision to move forward and change all of those pieces. But the way our process is set up, that's essentially how it's set up. I mean, really at any point, this group can ask for clarifications or things
And that's
like
really
that.
what we're
So,
asking.
Right.
How quickly does that
Right.
happen and how does
So,
that happen?
right, it doesn't naturally fit in for a couple years.
Right.
Again, up to the 9 individuals here.
If I could offer some clarification on that. Typically, you had cyclical revisions because of the resources that were necessary. And when you undertake a K to 12 English revision, back when I started, it was in a textbook adoption in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range. So the cyclical part of that, the revision, corresponded to the resource adoption as well as the standards. So that's why, to Dr. Cromer's point, there could be tweaks along the way, but a full-scale revision was often frowned upon because of resources, because of standards, and quite honestly, assessments and all the things that go along with it, because the assessed standards in these courses are aligned so that we can ensure success with the standards they need to accomplish when they get out of school. So the revision cycle was more, a lot of it was based on monetary back in the day. Now with everything electronic, you could vary from that or deviate from that a little bit because changes are made much more easily. But that's an older system that is being morphed into a newer expectation. So that's part of the reason you see these longer, and it's a massive undertaking. When you're writing K-12 English, that is a huge, huge undertaking that involves a very great deal amount of teachers and takes a lot of time before it can come to you.
Thank you.
So just clarification while you're up there. So since you said this part of the curriculum is already being redone, how long will that process take where it would not be any more work on Mr. Vega or you or anybody else to allow this class to be taught the way it is now with the trust in Mr. Vega to teach it both-sided, even though the curriculum sounds one-sided, and allow the process to work so it comes to us in the normal process?
I'm going to go back to my earlier response as a year. So using it, it's the same either way. You would certainly need a year to do that because of depending on how much changes, what gets added. I don't know till you sit down, you start to analyze and think about points that have come up. And obviously, if there's a vote or a desire to do that, really pinpointing on my part, I would want to better understand exactly. I know sort of we shared out, but I feel like in this setting, I'm not able to take notes and do all those things. So I'm going to have to know specifically what the concerns are or how we can address, how we can add to show the other, whatever the topic is. So is it incorporating social studies standards more to show where the connection is? That takes a lot of time and brain power to sit and analyze all of those things. So that was probably the longer version, Mr. Galizella, but still back to a year.
Dr. Cromer, to that point, a year would be rushing it. Is that safe to say? I mean, depending on how deep you have to get into changing this, 2 years is more of a realistic goal. I mean, we spend
right.
years on our curriculum.
Right.
A 1 year change of this course is going to be a rushed course.
Yes, it still
Thank you.
would be rushed. Yes, thank you.
For sake of Robert's rules, you made a motion to modify. Can we have a second so that
You already did.
we did? Okay, so we're in the discussion on how we modify. All right, thank you.
So would it be better if we modified and gave 2 years or 1 year? Would you feel, can it be done in 1 year on a normal cycle without putting more work on you guys outside of what you're already doing every day?
I would, and I, Dr. Downs had shared that if the course could possibly occur in the fall, again, that throws in sort of fall is tight, spring is a little bit better, but I don't know if we can, as a group, say it has to go on this side or that side, but obviously 2 years would be better to be able to do that and to report back out and share pieces if necessary. Because the analyzing and looking at your curriculum is ongoing. So it's not we write it, put it on the shelf, and we don't do anything. We're always modifying and adjusting and looking at supplemental resources. What new things, to Dr. Burkhardt, sharing it previously, it was books. It was all about books. There's a lot of online resources that fit into whatever curricular area, and those things come out. And we want to stay current on other types of resources to be able to support or whatever the topic might be.
Can I offer just a thought about the whole process? A couple of things that come up tonight that I feel might better help paint the picture of what the revision would look like and how did we get to where we are. I'll begin by saying, I will reiterate what everyone at this table has said, including the people in the audience, that Mr. Vega he's not a good teacher. He's an exceptional teacher. And if you've ever been in his class, you know exactly what I mean. So, Mr. Smith, you talked about this course. Man, that is what democracy is built on. So thank you for bringing that up. And Mr. Gelsinger, you talked about Mr. Vega's 3 decades of service has earned him credibility and trust. So a couple things that come up, talked about how do we teach a rigorous course? The most rigorous courses are taught with original source documents. The Constitution is an example, where you can pair that with a literary course and a history course at the same time. Those are some of the best courses to teach because it's factual and it is also historical. However, when you talk about a fiction versus a nonfiction book, what a nonfiction book does is it encourages the student to assume the character of the person that they are reading, and they draw correlations or differences, and from that, they come from their response. And that's probably some of the richest, most creative thinking we could ever get out of our students, because facts are facts, but assuming a character and trying to assimilate to them makes that the richer course. That's where the writing comes from. So does law repeat topics that are taught in core courses? Absolutely, but it's taught differently from a perspective of a fiction. And so for that reason, I'll draw the course. We do teach courses, maybe not fiction versus nonfiction, but we teach biology. But if you go on to biology, you're going to get into cellular. You're going to get into microbiology. So there is some repetition, and this is just another way to deliver it. So when you look at the revision of this course, it will repeat topics that are in other standards. Undoubtedly, that's a spiral effect. That's what good curriculum does. But what it also does is we talked about the word manipulation. It's written in there, but I would argue that Mr. Vega manipulates your thinking to say, you don't agree? Why? You agree? Why? What is it about you that does that? And I think that, if we look at some of the verbiage that's in there and it evokes passion from people saying, I don't agree with this, that's an easy fix. The hard part is making sure we don't lose the idea that the discourse comes and the assimilation with the character is where the rich learning takes place. And that is unique to each student. And I will say again, I have never seen anyone bring that out of a student the way he does. So the revision and the terminology is easy. Please don't abandon what this course brings out in our kids. I think that's the key we have to focus on. So I hope that helps understand the board. And I don't do that. Please understand, I'm not doing that for applause. I'm doing that to inform, because the 9 individuals up here are asked to make tough decisions. You agree with some of them. Mr. Gellisel and I have disagreed, but we found middle ground, and I think that's what we can do here. So thank you.
So I think, just as a thought, and Ms. Bauer, if I misinterpreted, I think I understood what you were asking. And if I didn't, please correct me. When we look at what the attachments are, There's a difference between reading what is written on a piece of paper and actually experiencing the way that something is taught. I have 4 children. My husband and I both tried desperately to potty train them. And guess what? One of us was successful and one of us was egregiously not successful. And that's just because we taught differently. And our children responded to the way that something was taught. I could have read every book humanly possible on potty training, but it wasn't the book that taught the child. It was my interpretation of the best way to lead my children forward. Now, I think when you read through these, yes, there are words in there that make you go, excuse you, what? But in that same breath, I'm not sitting in his class letting him teach me. I'm making snap judgments based off of words on a piece of paper. And I just feel like, again, and I'll be honest, I'm going to need you to repeat what you said, Keith, because we've kind of strayed from your amendment. But I'm if we vote, as long as I'm understanding it correctly, you're asking us to vote on whether it should be revised for an upcoming school year.
Ms. Weaver, I'm going to clarify the motion.
Okay.
I just wanted to give you time to
Okay.
speak.
Okay, so I'm just asking that all of us remember that there have been things in our lives, much like Dr. Burkhart just said, that were memorable because of the way that they were taught to us. I think a prime example of this, if you've ever.
But before we get into methods of teaching, the motion on the table is whether we're going to allow modification, not methods of teaching. We've kind of strayed in our discussion to methods of teaching. I'd like to take us back to the motion on the table, which is speaking to whether we want to allow it to exist for 1 year pending modification. The actual motion I'm going to put, if I understand you right, Mr. Gelsinger, is allow literary award winners class to exist for 1 year while modifying by appropriate curriculum personnel.
So I wrote something a little more formal. So the motion to redevelop the literary award winners election class by the end of school year 2025, 26. So that'd be the end of next year. That would allow him to teach the class this year as is and give him the year to remove the verbiage
Okay.
that we're discussing.
You
Right.
said 25, but you meant the school year
School year,
of 2025,
This is
2026?
24, 25, so 25, 26. That gives him 1 full year.
Okay.
That's 2 years. isn't it?
Does anyone else need to weigh in on the motion to allow it to exist for a year and while being modified?
So would we tell an alcoholic it's okay to drink maybe once or twice more? I don't think so. This class is irreparably flawed.
Right. Agreed. Okay. So,
And
yeah,
Ms. Weaver, you're okay then with, I think what you're saying is you're okay with having one curriculum, but having it taught in a method that is not consistent with the curriculum.
No, what I'm saying is
doesn't
that
sound
you're
like
looking at a
something we would
piece of paper and you're not standing in a classroom where the teacher says, and I'm just going to grab a word here. Sorry, because I was reading through it. But okay, so we're going to participate effectively in a range of collaborative discussions on grade levels, topics, texts, issues, and building. And then we put in a word, a trigger word, right? About race. And then Mr. Vega says, do you agree or do you disagree? Because that's not written here. How he presents it in his class is not written here, and it never will be. These lesson plans morph as teachers get energy from their classrooms. That's what a good teacher does. They stand up there and they say, I see power in these kids in this topic, and I'm going to allow them and guide them through this conversation. I'm not going to teach them my way and my way only. I am going to say, here is a topic, take it, morph it, create what you want from it, and give me the best you've got. And that is what I believe this man does.
To your point, Mr. Vega does teach effectively and fairly, but the curriculum, the long-term goals of the curriculum stated, for example, Unit 2, detect false, incomplete, or biased claims. Who decides what is false, incomplete, or biased?
The students.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and examine their implicit biases. So we have baked in goals that allow teaching on what is false, and it's to detect what's false. So again, what I'm hearing on this motion to it, and the crux of this is we can't modify this in time for this class to exist. So the motion that Mr. Gelsinger is putting forward is how this class continues to exist. And my biggest problem with this is I've made it clear for over a year where I stand on this course, been very transparent on my dislike and disdain for how this course is developed and presented, which is frankly, to my opinion, it's an assertion by the Department of Education and what we should teach here, and it's progressivist, as evidenced by the multitude of people that have spoken out and where they stand. So I'm against, if we allow a modification, we're allowing this to continue to exist. I have mentioned my objection to this class several times since last year when I voiced it, and I continue to say at this point we should have been able to anticipate that this was coming and have some means to adjust it to allow the class to continue if it was that important to us. And I understand we have ways of proceeding forward, but if we can't proceed forward in time to make this happen this year, then where I'm at is we eliminate and we can still develop this course and discuss bringing it back effectively.
I'd also like to remind you guys that he could take all these buzzwords out of this and still teach it one-sided, and we would never know it unless we were in the classroom. So just a general reminder of that. So I believe in Mr. Vega's ability to teach. And the only reason I'm agreeing to rewording some of this stuff is I think it will actually help his enrollment numbers. I think the way it's written is one-sided, and I
I
think
did
he's
want to
actually.
reword this, but what I'm hearing is we can't do that in time for the next semester. And so I don't think that's a compromise we can reach.
I have a hard time believing that minor adjustments couldn't be made in the next 5 months,
But and I thought about that.
if that's what we believe is necessary, minor adjustments.
I considered that as well, but just a general reminder that he's also a teacher. He has a job to do, to put more stuff onto his plate that wasn't already planned. That's why I was asking Dr. Cromer as far as when this would happen naturally anyway. So those are the things I took into consideration with my motion to amend, or modify. So if anything, I think we need to get a vote on the motion to modify, at least so we know where we're going from there.
Yeah, we were in discussion on your motion. So let's take.
I have one more point before to this motion.
Yep.
I believe that in a discussion with Dr. Burkhart, that he confirmed that if this course was removed, there was time and room to put all these students in other AP courses or something, other English courses. It would not be a burden, I believe is what he was getting across, that to find other homes for these students if this course was removed this year.
That is accurate. They put in other English courses, but that would result, they could be put in a course they don't want, and then they would say, well, put me in something else. So it could be, you are correct. There would be time because it's a spring semester, but it could lead to a domino effect.
I just want to make it clear that we're not hanging people out to dry here necessarily, because, I mean, somebody might take the opinion that we're just going to leave these kids with no class to go to. We definitely can make some adjustments.
No, I feel like we've had adequate discussion on the vote to modify. So again, Mr. Gelsinger, you want to read that motion one last time before we vote?
Sure, let me find it because I got about 7 different pages. So the motion to modify is a motion to redevelop the literary award winners election class by the end of 2025. That gives him 1 full year to redevelop.
The end of the 25-26 school year.
No, that would be 2
Okay.
years. We're doing 1 year.
Okay.
And I will say, as a member of this board, if he's not done by the end of that time, I would be willing to give him an extension with the curriculum to fall into place. So if Dr. Cromer feels he can finish it in a year, we'll go with that to start. But I do not want to take this class away from our students. I think every parent in our district is going to hear by now how politically driven this class could potentially be. So they will have the choice to remove their kids if they choose to.
So when you say end of 2025, I just want to make sure all the board members know. Do you mean by December of 2025?
the end of 24-25 school year.
So
So
Okay.
June of 25.
June of, and that's what's, okay.
Can you add June 30th of 2025? Just
Sure.
put the date there because that
Sure.
typically follows the end of a curriculum cycle anyhow, whenever things are approved.
Sure.
And just for clarity purposes, because I want to make sure, if we vote yes, then the course is amended by the end of that year. That what we just said. If we vote no, the course runs as it is.
Robert's, no, I'll clarify. Robert's rules said whenever you make an amendment to the motion, the amendment is adjudicated first. So if we make a motion to modify the initial motion, then that would supersede. If we adopt that new modification, that becomes the new motion.
So the
But it's
only
a
real
two-vote process.
The only real difference is we
Right,
added.
it's a
date.
two-vote process. We're first voting on the amendment, and then I think your question is the substance, when you vote on the substance. So her question is, when you vote on the substance, if it's voted down, it would, I guess, it would go back to where it is now, right. So there'd be a third vote.
Okay, so roll call vote on the modification motion made by Mr. Gelsinger.
Mr. Gelsinger.
Yes.
Mr. Leidy.
No.
Mr. Plessick.
No.
Mr. Smith.
No.
Mrs. Weaver.
No.
Mrs. Bauer.
No.
Mr. Beard.
No.
Mrs. Brennan.
No.
Mr. Gonzalez.
No.
1 yes, 8 no.
All right, so now the initial motion still stands, which is recommendation to redevelop in lieu of eliminating literary award winners of elective class at Southwestern High School for the spring 2025 semester. I feel like we've adequately discussed this, unless anyone has a
Do we
burning
need to
need.
clarify that if it has not been redeveloped by 2025, that it's eliminated, or what?
I mean, that's what they said. If this vote goes through to redevelop with the understanding that it would be redeveloped by this spring semester, we've been told that's not possible. So a yes vote effectively eliminates the course.
For
A
this
no
year until it
vote
can be
would leave it the
redeveloped.
way it stands and
A
it
no
keeps
vote would
going.
leave it the way it stands.
Correct.
Just want to make sure I understood.
So the motion is to redevelop for the spring 2025 semester. If you vote for that, then, I think we need to reword.
If you vote for that, that class gets eliminated this year.
It's not possible, right? It's not
I'd like
possible
to
to proceed.
suggest that we table this until it can be dealt with through the normal process that Dr. Burkhart and Dr. Cromer said is going to be happening here in the next few years anyway.
If we vote to redevelop, as is written, if we vote to redevelop, a yes vote means it cannot happen, and therefore the class does not proceed. The class does not occur. A yes vote means class doesn't happen
Until it's redeveloped.
until it's redeveloped. So that's clarity. We all clear? A yes vote means the class does not occur until it's redeveloped. A no vote means, no, I don't want to make that change, and it exists as is. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Leidy.
Yes.
Mr. Plessick.
No.
Mr. Smith.
No.
Mrs. Weaver.
No.
Mrs. Bauer.
No.
Mr. Beard.
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan.
No.
Mr. Gelsinger.
No.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
3 yes, 6 no.
All right, Ms. Weaver, we're on to 8C2.
Eight C2 is a recommendation to approve the proposed 2025 to 2028 Southwestern School District Future Ready Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee and Subcommittee membership.
Second.
So this committee and subcommittee has been created with the help of board members as well as the administration by pulling local community members, students in our buildings, and I think that they have done an excellent job. As of this morning, there looked like, or I guess it was last night, there looked like there were a few openings still, but I am confident that we will absolutely have members of our community willing to volunteer to finish that out.
With
And I
that being
apologize, I
said-
didn't check it right before I left, come here, so I don't know if it filled today.
That's going to be my point of clarification on this. So we still have vacancies. So in filling those, do we need to reapprove when we appoint to those vacancies? Or
Yeah, we can do this one of two ways. You can approve the list exactly as is right now. You saw the number of vacancies, and if there are additional names that you have that you would like to have us add to this list, you can certainly let me know, and I can bring it back as another list. We could do it that way if you would prefer, or you can discuss right now. If you have some names that you would like to add in, and we could add those names in now to this list and then put that forward.
What's your time frame on that? Because I'm in communication with a few people that obviously it's a big undertaking.
Yep.
I haven't given them a timeline when they need to say yes or no.
So my plan was tomorrow, sending out the letters to everybody who's on this list to invite them to a meeting on August 29th.
Yeah.
So I would love it if we could have those names as soon as possible. I could send the letter out to who's on the list, and then we could come back in 2 weeks at the next board meeting, and then we could add additional names, which I would then just invite to that meeting, if you
So
would prefer to do it that
to
way.
that end, I put a post out on a couple of social media sites that there were vacancies if any parent wanted to apply. I did get one correspondence to my school email that Ms. Caitlin Moonihan wanted to be on Student Services Subcommittee. I did not receive any other correspondence, but I guess that I should deliver that to you now. That's the most.
Dr. Burkhart and Dr. Friel, I forwarded you both emails today, a list of names as well.
Can we add them now?
we
Do you
could-
have the list, or?
I could pull
Sorry
that
to put
up.
you on the spot. Do you have a?
I didn't bring it with me.
I
I
have
can,
it.
You have it?
If you could maybe table this for a little bit, we could come back around. Is that possible?
Okay.
I could just go
So
back
later
in
in the
and look
meeting?
at those a
Okay.
little bit later in this meeting.
Okay.
I'd be happy
So-
to come back around.
to the
that.
credit of the people whose names were on the list, I
Right.
didn't have dates to give them, so they may
Right.
still have to say
And
no.
keep in mind that most of the people on this list, have no idea that their names are on this list.
Oh, fantastic.
Nobody has been communicated yet. That's happening tomorrow to invite them to participate.
Okay.
So the board is just taking action to say, yes, let's move forward and invite. And
Okay.
then once the invitations go out, I mean, people could still say no.
Yeah.
Or they just could not come to those meetings. I mean, that would be their choice.
So we'll have a
But-
final approval.
So
Who's the
I, absolutely. So everybody, before I send the letter out, I'll make sure that those names come to you to say yes or no to. So if you vote on this list right now, I'll send that out, get the invitations out, and if you want to
And we'll
add
update later.
additional
Okay.
names, I'll just send out new invites to those people after the board has said yes to those.
All right, I need a motion to table 8C2 until Dr. Friel has
So
opportunity.
before we table it, could you, for the community, just explain exactly what this is? Give them the 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So
And
every.
how much commitment it exists?
Yes, I can do both of those things. Every 3 years, we are required by the state to go through a comprehensive planning process. It's a very in-depth process. We have several stages to it, 3 phases actually. We are in this phase right now of trying to put together a steering committee, and the steering committee is made up of 3 subcommittees, and each subcommittee will meet twice. Once sometime in the month of September, and then again sometime between the months of November and December. Through that process, we look at several things. We look at the district vision statement, the mission statement, the educational values. We look at performance data. We try to develop the goals that will steer our organization forward over the next 3 years. All of that information is then compiled. We'll bring that to the board in January, where you will get a chance to look at sort of the whole committee. There are 80-some names right now on this list, with the potential for adding 12 to 15 more. It's a very, very large group of people, representative of all stakeholders across the community and in the schools. We'll bring that information to you in January. We'll kind of present what we're offering. We'll then take it out for feedback. People will give some feedback on how that looks. We'll make revisions. We'll bring it back to the board then in March with the potential to have it voted on at the end of March of 2025. And then that would be the next 3-year plan. So hope I clarified that. 2 commitments really for the community members to come, once in that September range, and then once again in December, like November, December.
Thanks for that. I figure we have a very large audience out of the normal, so it was a
Yeah.
great time.
Yeah,
to
that is a
pitch.
good time.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to 8C3.
So motion to table 8C2 to later in the agenda.
Second.
So I'll make that motion. Anyone want a second?
Second.
So motion by me, second by Mr. Lighty to table it to the end of the meeting to allow Dr. Friel time to adjust the list. And now, oh, yes, right, I'm
All in
sorry.
favor?
Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion passes to table it to the end of the agenda.
8C3, a recommendation to approve a waiver of policy 239, foreign exchange students, as it relates to foreign exchange student 2025-02.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Weaver, second by, we'll go with Mr. Smith this time. Before we consider that, I'd like to first invite Dwayne and Rebecca Mail to step up to the mic to further inform the board on what's transpired on this.
Yeah, press the button. There you go.
There you go. Now
You're
it's on.
live.
So thank you for coming in. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share what's involved from your end. We obviously can't share your information publicly, but you can.
Okay.
So if you want to inform us whatever you're comfortable with in regards to this incident, that'll help the board understand the situation.
First of all, did you guys receive my letter that I wrote in regards to why we are asking for exception this year?
We did not.
Okay. Would you like me to give you a copy of each?
Sure.
I have 13.
Great.
I'll read it right now.
When did you send that in and where did you send it?
I sent it to Mr. Burkhart on Friday at 3:35. He was supposed to send it to you guys on Monday.
Give it to Dr. or Mr. Bowen. He was forwarded it. So did you not get it?
No.
I didn't see that. Thank you.
Well, he has copies of it here too.
I'll give you a chance to look at it real quick.
I'm sure it's in here, but I think the biggest concern is what caused your filing to be late. I think that's what we want to hear.
Well,
the most.
we do foreign exchange students in the summertime. And at that time, we were not aware that there was an academic year for students to come here. So we went through the process of getting approved to get a foreign exchange student to come here.
We found out from a friend about 3 weeks ago that they get children for this whole school year. And we liked it because we do it in the summertime and we really enjoy it. So that's why we're late. We had no clue about the policy, and how would we know about the policy?
Yeah.
So that's the clarification we needed. So this is an exchange program, and typically they'll direct you to contact the school and make those arrangements.
That's why we did go to the school, but we were not aware of a July 1st until
What was the
after we
time
had.
frame from when you applied to the program and when you approached the school with it?
We
applied
call
about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks ago, and we went to the school with
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Post haste then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty fast.
My
So
wife being a school teacher, she kind of knows out some of the rules, but we don't know anything about the foreign exchange with the school program.
but we are asking for exception this year because our daughter is a senior, which I know there was some concerns with transportation. And if she was to go to Dillon Catholic, the school would have to provide transportation. But our daughter being a senior, she's already coming here. So she would be able to help Victoria come to the school through the Links program, which is for new students, and the orientation throughout the school that she's trained on. Then she would also be able to be that support through the mental health aspect of it, because she's coming from a whole different program in Germany and coming here, not having friends, not knowing anyone. Autumn would be able to help her. We also were trying to help alleviate you guys having to pay the costs for transportation, knowing that there isn't bus drivers and there isn't transportation. So we are willing to do that. We also understand that classes are full through the elective side of it, not through the main part of classes. So she, being a foreign exchange student, she doesn't need many of the electives. She needs the main core ones. Also, we've actually paying for Autumn to do the dual enrollment. So Autumn won't be in a class for the first 2 periods each day during the spring and the fall.
So that's an important distinction. That was one of the main concerns is our high school is burgeoning, especially in
Mhm.
electives. So, Dr. Downs, could you add for us just basically, have you looked at where the schedule would occur if the student was accepted to see what those class sizes would result in?
I did not have met with the males
Mhm.
on Wednesday, August 7th.
Okay.
At that time, I said policies and
Right,
laws,
for the policy.
so I can't do any action until,
Okay,
board policy. I can't violate board policy.
right.
Enjoyed our meeting together, I thought we had a great meeting. But
And it's certainly not a critique of you following policy. You're following policy. It falls to us. I just wanted to understand the impact. I just wanted to understand the impact. Do you, so no electives are required for her attendance?
She only has to have the English, math, history, and social studies or science. That's
So
the
do
only
you-
ones that they're requiring. They said if they have availability, she could do electives.
And she wouldn't even attend initially because of dual enrollment on,
Autumn wouldn't,
oh, your
our
daughter. Okay, I'm sorry.
The foreign exchange student Victoria would not still come. And
I
she
gotcha.
could do gym or
Music.
Spanish or music, which I know they're not full classes.
Okay. Does that make it easier for, if we were to approve this, Dr. Downs, does that make it easier in regard to,
I would have to sit down, and obviously look over the whole thing with
I'm
the
not going to hold you
counselors
to it,
and
just
say,
ballpark
and
it.
say exactly what courses does she need. I know when we spoke, I guess she's fluent in 3 languages
Yeah,
or
she's
whatever.
fluent in German, Russian, and English. She's pretty high
Wow.
in English.
So, I would have to talk with our counselors, what benefits she would get out of certain levels of those courses.
Okay.
Obviously, she wouldn't take a Spanish or German
Right,
1.
Yes.
I don't think she would learn anything from German 1.
I think
But
she
it's
could
one of
teach it.
those things we would have to sit down
Well-
and look at that.
Yeah.
We were also thinking that a suggestion, she could be like a mentor to a teacher and help support the kids in the classroom as well. But like, again, it wouldn't be an exception for any other year. It's just this year with Autumn being a senior and her being able to support her.
Yeah, having 2 children in our house, Autumn's in color guard, and it would be hard, to go to one and then Victoria's in something and
No,
doing
I
that.
understand
It
that.
would split the family up, and
Yeah.
we just want to stay together,
Any other board members have questions?
I don't have any questions. I just, as a quick comment, my family hosted exchange students growing up, and I found it to be an incredibly valuable experience for myself and my siblings. I think opening your house to someone else's child is always a wonderful thing. When it comes to us, we're based on following and interpreting policy. As your letter states, your understandable last-minute decision to enroll this child would have pushed you past the July 1st, but so would a child that had moved into the district August 1st. And I know for a fact we enroll kids the night before school starts. So certainly don't want you to think the board is accusing you of doing anything on purpose. We just, for clarity purposes and to make sure we understood the process, as it was explained to me, and I didn't know that these organizations typically know the rules and regs, but since you didn't start that process even before the rules and the regs would have kicked in, it would make sense that not only did you not know, but that they couldn't do their due diligence because it was a last minute thing. So for clarity purposes, it's very, very helpful. So thank you.
I just have a clarifying question, just for Dr. Dalton. Is there any legal requirement for the July deadline, or is that just something written in our policy to help with scheduling?
No legal.
Okay, thank you.
Question came up about the visa category. Is it J1 or F1?
She has, I believe, I have all her paperwork. Sorry.
You're fine. Take your time.
She should have a J1.
That's typically what the foreign exchange students have, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what it is.
Yeah.
J1, thank you.
Okay, I mean, the board has a lot to consider. The balance here is, do have room in my estimation, just so I explain where I'm going to vote on this is, I'm all for keeping the kids in your house together. There are considerations for class size. I think the fact that you're able to identify that this is less of a burden than a kid who's arriving to our district late, because she doesn't have to take the electives, which is the biggest challenge in our schools is those overburgeoning elective classes. So I think the board has the right to adjust the policies as it sees best, case by case. This doesn't establish, and that's the concern, is whether this establishes a precedent for us to have to do this. I think that I can speak for all of us. We reserve the right to case by case look and decide the availability in our school and whether we can take someone. But that's where I stand on it. Anyone else? All right, thank you for stepping up.
Thank you.
And thank you for the letter.
You're welcome. Sorry you didn't get it.
Okay, so we're on the discussion. So without further discussion, let's go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
No.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Leidy,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Moving forward, congratulations.
Thank you.
8C number 4 is a recommendation to approve the memorandum of understanding between York Adams Mental Health Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Program, also known as MHIDD, and Southwestern School District setting forth the agreement of the parties with respect to providing case management services.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Weaver, second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Leidy,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Next is a recommendation to approve the services agreement between New Story LLC and Southwestern School District to provide certain educational and related services to students with special education requirements. The agreement is effective from August 15th, 2024 until August 14th, 2025.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Weaver, second by Mr. Smith. Discussion. You want to clarify it, or?
I feel like for most of these are things that we've done before, or maybe the company's name is different, but they're services we provide to our students.
Okay. All right, roll call vote.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Leidy,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
And 6 was moved to policy, so we're on to 8D1, Mr. Pleasant.
All right, I'd like
Sorry,
to,
yes, we can go to that table now. We have the updated list, okay?
Yes, my thought would be if I read to you these names of what was recommended, you can maybe approve, I don't know if there would be a motion to add those into the existing list. So I don't know if that's a separate motion, might be 2 motions, if you know what I mean. I'm going to read to you the names that are given. You can decide if you want to add them into the list, and then we can approve the whole list.
So if any board member has a specific name that they do not want to approve the list, just ask that be separated out on a vote separately, I guess.
Okay,
Other
so
than
should I
that,
read the names to you then?
Yes,
or-
read
okay.
all the names.
All right, so the
So
names.
I
yes.
have one concern just before we
Yeah.
get into that.
Sure.
There's an opening for 9 parents to be on there and 3 community members. Is there room for more than that? Because if some of us, like I said, I'm in touch with some people.
Yeah.
If some of us come later and say, hey, I had someone I wanted to be on there, but we've already approved
So I'm going to.
10 people tonight.
Right, so it's not that many, so there are still going to be vacancies
Okay.
based on what I'm about to read to you. So I'm going
Okay.
to say yes to that.
Okay.
I can confidently say yes.
Okay.
There will be names for additional people coming on. Anybody who wants to be in a meeting with me can come at any time. I just want to go on record.
And
to say
80
that.
other people.
80 other people. That is very true. All right, so the names to add to the list. Justine Truckus, Caitlin Mooneyhan, Carrie Zambelli, Annie Walgamuth, Naya Singh, Hope Collier, and Tanya Louth.
Okay.
All right.
Could you follow those up with an email to us as well, just so we have the record of it?
Right, absolutely. I'll,
Thank
I'll
you.
revise this whole list. I'm sure I'm going to want to give it to Mr. Mummert anyhow for the notes, but I will take care of doing all of that and I'll send that out to you tomorrow. Yes,
Actually, I just had one question to clarify.
Sure.
that, All of the parents and community members must be residents of the district, right?
yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And what did you, if we wanted to remove a member, just call them out? We would vote on them individually, or what's?
If you want to identify someone for further consideration, we'll vote on the rest of the list and you can pull a name out to discuss as a board, kind of like a separate item.
Yeah,
Or
I guess if you feel that there's any name that was submitted to you that is of concern, maybe do not vote on this list
I'd like to
tonight.
remove Justine Truckus. She's been very critical of the board, and I don't feel like I can work well with her.
Okay, so let's vote on the remainder of the list and then we'll discuss adding Ms. Truckus.
Okay, so the rest of the list as created, as just suggested.
Right.
Okay,
So the motion needs to be made to approve the currently recommended, sorry, where are we?
number one. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Number
I'm on the
two.
wrong
Number
page.
two.
Yeah. Recommendation to approve the proposed 25-28 Southwestern School District Future Ready Comprehensive Steering Committee and Subcommittee membership. So we now have the proposed list for approval that includes all the names that Dr. Phil just read, minus the one, which we will then vote on separately.
Is that the motion?
That's the motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
We already had a motion and a second before it's
Did we?
tabled.
I was just informed we didn't.
It was
I
tabled.
thought that was.
Okay.
It's tabled and brought back.
Just questioning.
Oh, it was tabled and then brought back. Yeah, regardless, we're to vote, right? Correct? So let's
You
go to
ready,
the vote.
Jeff?
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Lady,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
All right, now, a motion to add Ms. Trux's, Truxes, how do you say it? Truxes to the steering committee as stated in the previous agenda item. Any
Just as comment, we've,
second?
I'll
second,
Okay.
just
Motion by
as
me, second by
comment,
Ms. Lady.
we've received multiple emails from Ms. Truxas that have been very inflammatory. I don't mean that she's just critical. I'm fine with critical. But she's had multiple inflammatory remarks, and I believe you've actually called her out for that in a response email.
I will confirm that it's been very, at times, it hasn't been civil. With that being said, I do believe that there's always opportunity to adjust discourse and work within the confines of how a steering committee would operate to move forward. So personally, while I do have concerns, I echo your concerns. I'm hopeful that we can continue towards an appropriate dialogue. So that's
I'll say she's a parent of the district, she's a resident of the district, and who cares if she has an opposing view? If it was stacked one-sided, we wouldn't be steering. very
Again, it's
well.
not about the view, it's about her inflammatory remarks that make her hard to work with. Someone over there said discourse. If you can't have discourse with someone who is inflammatory.
Okay.
Dr. Friel, you'll be in charge of these meetings, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, seeing no further discussion, let's vote on that.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Lady,
No.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
No.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no.
Now you're up, friend.
All right. Go ahead. I'm going to keep it moving. All right, number 8D, item 1 and 2, change orders.
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Plessick, second by Mr. Lighty. Any discussion? Mr. Beard.
So I'd like to give a thank you to Nate Osborne for all that he does on these renovation projects. He's always looking for cost savings, and he comes forward with a lot of great suggestions for things that we can change or improve upon. So I do want to give Mr. Osborne credit for that, but I do have an objection to the change order request of $28,000. As we discussed in our meeting Monday night, out of that $28,000, about $16,000 to $18,000 is for the renovation of a bathroom, a restroom that was just inadvertently overlooked at the time that the construction, the renovation requirements and the bids were put together. I don't have any objection to that. But out of that $28,000, there's about $10,000 or so that is specifically for the increased cost associated with changing the restroom stalls from 6.5 feet in height to around 7.5 or 8 feet in height. I don't see why we need to spend an extra $10,000 for restroom stalls that are greater than 6.5 feet in height. That's taller than almost everyone. And so I object to that $10,000 for the extra 12 to 18 inches of restroom stall height.
Okay, any other discussion?
I am in agreement with Mr. Beard on that. I believe the standard size of stall would be fine. I also am in disagreement with number 1. It was stated by the board when the vote was placed that the Independence Law Center would not cost the district any money, cost the taxpayers any money. $8,700 to do demolition, which actually has already been started prior to board approval in the middle school bathroom in a brand new building, while we have a gutted high school, seems slightly out of place to me.
So I'll weigh in on that and say the Independence Law Center is not an additional cost. It's the guidance they're providing as solicitor. They're suggesting we make the expenditure. They're not costing us anything. They provide guidance that we've adopted, and that's why we have it on agenda to adopt.
But we didn't vote on it before the demolition started.
Okay. Well, we're voting on it now, and we operate from that, that place very frequently.
I have one comment on number 1. This particular thing, this change here is to not get sued because of the policy that the previous board enacted. That is why this change is being made. So the previous board put that policy in. We're trying to make sure we're safe from getting sued now because of it, to make sure that all students are safe in every building.
Right, and I would also add to that, that's also, we are removing the front wall of bathrooms, so that additional height that we're adding to our stalls is to, while we take away the initial privacy between the stalls and the sinks, we are adding privacy in the toilet facility that adds privacy there, which is more important than at the sink. And so that's why I would justify that expenditure. All right, seeing no other discussion. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Lighty,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
No,
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
No.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
6 yes, 3 no.
Okay, on to 8A1, Mr. Lighty.
I'd like to make a recommendation to approve 8E1. It is a recommendation, request for tuition waiver for a high school senior.
Second.
Motion by Lighty, second by Smith. Discussion?
We can't really discuss.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, this was executive session. You're right. So it's straight to a vote.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Lady,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
I'd like to make a recommendation for 8E2. It's a recommendation to approve a request for a tuition waiver for a kindergarten student that will be moving into the district shortly.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Lady, second by Mr. Smith. Any discussion? We can't, because again, this was part of executive session, so we're going on to a roll call vote.
Mr. Lady,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
I'm going to lump the rest of these together unless anybody has an objection.
No, please do.
Okay, I'll make a recommendation to approve 8E, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. These are
Second.
all for,
Motion by Mr. Lady, second by Mr. Gelsinger. Any discussion?
the only thing I can say, they all seem to be, they're sports and recreation. They all seem to be fit in their category, except for, with the exception of number 7. We are waiving turf fees for the first usage. But they're, have a lot of other stuff going on and are paying a significant amount to use it.
I actually did have one point of question I wanted to ask Mr. Osborne. Why does the high school field hockey need custodial, but the elementary events do not? Is that a matter of what amount of trash, or they come with a parent, or?
Here.
Just stay back to quarter.
I'm wondering.
So it's not so much the custodial end of it as it is porta pots and restroom service. Most of the football teams will drop a porta pot out next to the football fields where it's close for access. When the field hockey teams come in, they're using our field that has our porta pot on it and our trash removal.
Okay.
So the rec football teams operate a lot more independently out at the elementary schools than what
Okay.
any team does that comes in here on the main campus does, whether it's in our stadium or our old turf field.
Okay. Appreciate the distinction.
Can you clarify why all of these are category Bs and not category As, just for the public?
Category A's are actual school sanctioned athletic programming. B's are most of the time our rec, is how I term it, our rec leagues. So a lot of it's elementary football programs, elementary lacrosse, whatever it is, but it's not official varsity level type interscholastic sports.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Lady,
Yes.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
All right, moving on to 8F1, Policy Committee. It's me, and that's a recommendation to approve the tentative adoption of Policy 906. I'll make the motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Motion by me, second by Mr. Gelsinger. Discussion related to this. So this, in looking at this is a complete rework of our public complaints, in my estimation. I did want to ask our solicitor what the genesis of the rework was to understand.
I'm so glad you asked that, because that was my first question as well.
And I don't know, Dr. Seibel's here. There's been a series of requirements from those who are monitoring from the federal programs coordinators. And so you'll see that the revamp is mostly pertains to language that is expected from the monitors in the state when it comes to public complaints for federal programs. You'll note that there's other language to sort of streamline the step 1 process, the step 2 process, the step 3, it streamlines it. Certainly that could be revised, but the federal programming part definitely needs to be changed for purposes of monitoring, which is happening this school year.
Okay.
I
So,
don't think the policy had been revised for quite a while, so I was just updating the language. Yeah, 20 years, so.
and appreciate that. And so in consideration of the multi-tier and the overarching impact of it, when I was questioned by other board members, what is this and what are we doing? My suggestion coming into the meeting was we make a motion to refer this to our policy committee so we can thoroughly consider it. It's lengthy and it has multiple impacts. So I'm making a motion that we refer this to our policy committee.
Second.
So motion by me, second by Mr. Lighty. Any discussion on moving it to policy committee for further consideration? All right, can we get a vote?
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver?
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Beard?
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger?
Yes.
Mr. Lighty?
Yes.
Mr. Plessick?
Yes.
Mr. Galzola?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
All right, and item 2 under policy committee was the one we moved, which is on page 9, which is the recommendation to approve updates to 24-25 EHMMS handbook. So recently, I just want to give this kind of a lead in. Oh, wait, I need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by me, second by Mr. Lighty. Discussion. Recently, we received the email that Principal Winters sent out expressing his desire to alter the section of the handbook related to whether students are allowed to bring their cellular devices to lunch or recess. I do want to get the verbiage of that directly. If anyone else wants to weigh in while I pull that up, please do, but I will bring that up shortly. So our policy currently reads in the student handbook, students will be permitted to take personal devices to lunch recess time. Students must return personal devices to their lockers upon returning to class. So the proposal would be not permitted to take those devices to lunch or recess. So to open discussion, I understand it, and I applaud you for right in the gate asking your personnel, hey, what's important to you? I hear they brought this forward as something that they've wanted, and that's always good to review the desires of your personnel when you immediately take leadership. It's an admirable endeavor. That being considered, my only concern with this is, as a parent myself, is students have typically used that time where they can take their cell phones to lunch or recess to reach out to parents. I'm not against limiting their device to not include lunch or recess. However, I do think we should include some type of measure to allow them, because currently number 6 in our policy states, parents who need to contact their child should contact our front office and will contact the student immediately. Students who need to contact a parent during the school day should go to the main office. Students may not use their personal device to call FaceTime parent guardians during the school day. I don't like the measure of not allow students to use their personal devices to contact their parents. So along with Principal Winter's suggestion to alter 3, which allowed that contact, I would ask that we additionally consider, and I'll make that motion at the end, to remove students may not use their personal device to call FaceTime parents. And my way to present this for consideration is I would suggest students could, under the change in 3, students would only be able to reach out to parents via text or phone during a locker break or between class and lunch. We would allow a small time frame, 3 to 5 minutes, to contact home with any concern they have. I can think of a multitude of reasons why a student would want to contact their parent, and a text in today's society is reasonable to contact a parent. And I don't want to get in between that contact between the child and their parent. I understand why it was instituted. However, as we're adjusting 3, I still feel like we're stopping that contact. That's my only consideration. Yes, Dr. Winters.
So the leadership team, and I'll say Dr. Smale started this last spring, talking about it, but the main concern was that students that had access to their cell phones or personal devices during lunch and recess weren't using them appropriately. So they were using them to contact other students. That could include cyberbullying. They could do TikTok challenges, which would cause bathroom vandalization, and all types of multitudes. So the policy or expectations at any level, really, high school or middle school, is that they're not walking down the phone contacting their parents. They've always been expected to use the office phones to speak to the parents during the school day. So that really hasn't changed as the expectation. Really, the only expectation that would be changed is that we're trying to eliminate students misusing their phones during those unstructured times. I know there are students that use them appropriately, but unfortunately, in the world we live in, sometimes those students do have to suffer for the choices of their peers.
And that's exactly to your point, right? It's an appropriate limitation considering all the problems. However, I had developed a top 10 reasons to not have my child have to speak into a front office phone in front of other administrators to their parent about sensitive topics that they would only want to discuss with a parent. I'm not going to belabor that point, but that's my concern. And in today's society where they have that device, we're having them lock it in a locker room in their locker. I don't think it's unreasonable to, and I get to your point, it's been abused, but I am not for developing policy that limits well-behaved kids for the sake of the kids that aren't well-behaved.
And I would just say I think child, when they're transitioning, if they stopped at their locker and that's where they had their phone, or let's be honest, some students probably have them on them,
Right.
but they don't have them out in class, and okay, they're not getting caught, they're not using them, kudos to them. But if they are like at their locker in between class, if they quickly check their cell phone or something, we're not probably gonna see every kid that's doing that.
Right.
The issue is when they're in that unstructured time for a period of time, like lunch or recess. So,
And that's why I fully support you taking it out of that unstructured time, that the headaches involved with that far outweigh the advantage. I'm just, for a teacher that wants to strictly adhere to the statements in this policy, they're gonna say, you're not allowed to call your parent or FaceTime, right? And that's the concern I have, is the ambiguity there. I get where we are operationally. I just want to make that official, that at their locker or just prior to lunch, they can check in with home. And that's the only time I'm suggesting they be able to do so as addition. But, and I'll take your input from that. What do you think as far as that?
I mean, I just would want students to know that that's all they're doing, right? They're
Right.
still those kids then we pulled out and, hey, meet me in the bathroom after this period because I have a vape product on me. That a lot of times you find kids, I put a vape, under this toilet stall, or,
Right.
you get those things where kids are smart and they're using those devices to break school rules too. And
Right.
I will also add, like if a student ever wants to use a office phone, we give them privacy as well. So we're not always sitting in the office, listening to their conversations. We would give them private space.
So point of information, based on what I'm hearing you say, this is your way to solve for policies that are already in place by putting this recommendation to more specifically adhere to those bullying and harassment, cyber bullying policies where there may have been ambiguity previously.
Yes,
Thank you.
Can the students contact their parents through their Chromebook?
they could email them.
Okay, thank you.
I'm
And-
all for this. In fact, I might be minority, but I'm one of those that think cell phones need to be taken out of school altogether.
Amen.
My older two, when they were here, they were not allowed to bring their cell phones. If it were up to me, no kid would bring a cell phone to the school, so I'm totally for it.
I just wanted to say thanks for being a leader. I
Yeah.
think I agree. And to your one comment, Mr. Galazello, I think every law we have in the land is because people broke the laws.
So I just respond with, I mean, this is the dialogue, right? So I can tell you personally, my kids who almost with regularity follow the rules. I'll go there, right? They regularly manage during the day. We manage back and forth with my practice got moved. Open mats is 5:30 instead of 6, for instance, which I get coaches do send out that communication, but sometimes that last minute communication doesn't happen. That will happen between a child and their parent readily with phone. And I do realize it occurs at the end of the day, but it also comes down to not enough money on my lunch account. Mom might tell daughter, hey, I'm working late. When you get home, you're going to be on your own tonight. Those kind of regular day-to-days to have that child practically go to the front office to get that message is an interruption, considering they can barely make it between classes as is with lunch breaks. I just don't think practically sending a kid to the front office when they want to tell mom, hey, I need more lunch money on my account is time constraints are very strict, right? We're limited timeframes, correct?
Yes.
Right, and so what would your answer to that be?
I think that anytime you put a policy in place, there's going to be, negative outcomes.
Yeah.
But I also think you have to look at the potential positives. And I think in this situation, I think the benefits of putting this in place completely outweighs any potential negative outcomes.
Okay, I appreciate you coming up.
I have one question for Dr. Downs. Are we considering anything like this at the high school? And when could that be implemented?
Well, I'll be honest with you, high school, we have a lot of kids that work after school, employers contact them. Obviously, kids drive, daughters leaving practice at night, things of that nature. So to ban phones, like they can't bring them into the school, I think would be a bad idea. But to actually limit them, it's something I want to look at this fall. But I want to actually bring groups of students together and bring groups of parents together at the high school level and get their input. I don't just want to sit there and say, hey, we're going to ban phones in the high school, because there are a lot of variables with kids driving and practice and work and internships. And it's different, an 18-year-old versus a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. I have an 18-year-old, I have a 13-year-old, okay, I have a 16-year-old, and I see the differences. And so there's a lot of different layers to that, and I actually want to get input from all groups, not just sitting there saying at the high school level, we're going to ban cell phones.
While you're looking at that, I would make a recommendation that you seek data.
Sure.
Specifically related to different age groups.
Yep.
Especially post 2020.
Yeah.
And perhaps some learning deficiencies and some increased cases of bullying tendencies based on increased cell phone use.
Absolutely. And at this point, because I do communicate with all the other principals in the county, I do not know of any at this point, any other high school in York County that has banned phones. At this point, I don't know of any. That's not to say over the summer they might have decided to do that. I'm going to send an email out to find out, part of my research here in the fall
I do think it's apples and oranges, high school to middle school, because like you say, there's work release, there's any number of additional things that are being managed by the student directly through their work and
Correct.
their, any number of additional things that, honestly, I think you'd wind up with a crowd at the front office waiting to use the phone in
Yeah.
some regard, whereas the middle school, not as much.
Well, and I know when I was in the classroom, I actually had a student in my class that had a child that was at the same daycare where my son was. And, when daycare would call and say your kid is throwing up or has diarrhea, they have to go home. It's very hard to say to that 18-year-old kid, you can't bring your phone, something like that. But again, there's all kinds of variables to it. And that's why I want to get input from everyone. I do not want to just sit there and say, Keith Downs thinks we shouldn't have phones in school. I have strong beliefs on certain things both ways. I mean, I have 3 teenage sons, so, 2 that drive, so I understand those perspectives. So there's a lot of layers to it.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, thank you, Dr. Downs. Oh, wait, we got one latecomer.
I appreciate both your efforts. I would support any policy that takes cell phones out of schools. In fact, I think half the problems of our society would be solved if we all got rid of our cell phones. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the motion on the table is to approve the recommendation to approve the updates to 24-25 EHMMS handbook. Seeing no further discussion, Jeff, roll call vote.
My microphone is dead, but I am a
Mrs.
yes.
Weaver. Mrs. Bauer.
Yes.
Mr. Beard.
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan.
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger.
Yes.
Mr. Lady.
Yes.
Mr. Plessick.
No.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Gelzella.
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
And at this time, I'm going to put a motion on the table to amend policy 6 in the EHMMS personal device guidelines in the handbook to strike, students may not use their personal device to call, FaceTime parents during the school day. Anyone second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion by me, second by Ms. Brennan. So this is just the motion to remove the prohibition that students cannot call their parents during the day.
Mrs. Bauer.
Can you read
Sure.
to me one more time what you said?
So in the EHMS personal guidelines section of the handbook, it states at the last portion of number 6, it says, students may not use their personal device to call, FaceTime parent guardian during the school day. I've made a motion to strike that sentence alone.
Yes.
Mr. Beard.
No.
Mrs. Brennan.
No.
Mr. Gelsinger.
Can I clarify this? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm voting the right way.
Clarify the vote, yes.
You're asking if we don't strike this down,
Then it stands as is in the current
But
policy.
can they call their parents from the office?
Yes.
Yes. And yet the statement in our policy says, students may not use their personal devices
So
to
you
call.
didn't say personal devices.
I thought I read the whole, I did. read the
No.
whole
You
sentence.
did not say personal devices.
I'll read the entire sentence for clarity. My apologies if I did not read the entire sentence. Students may not use their personal device to call, FaceTime parent guardians during the school day. We'll restart the vote for clarity. Is that clarified?
What should you have
So it's a
discussion?
motion to strike that sentence. So let's restart the roll
Should
call.
you have more discussion on that to clarify
Do we
that?
want, okay,
It doesn't say you can't call your cousin. It doesn't say you can't call a drug dealer.
correct,
It doesn't say,
Eliminating it.
right, it
Right.
just says you can't call your parent.
right.
So because of that, that's why I would think the sentence is a little ridiculous.
It is. It puts prohibitions
So-
against just the parent, not a friend, not a buddy, not your classmate.
Yeah.
But you can't call your parent.
Right.
But the clarifier was personal device. And if they can't, if what you stated previously was they have to have it in their locker, how would one use their personal device to contact a parent if it's always in the locker? There's still that clarifier.
That's why I stated earlier, they get locker breaks during the day. They go to the locker. That is the time they can take out their phone, text mom, put it back in their locker, if they can still abide by the time constraints to arrive in class on time. And additionally, between their last class before lunch, they would have time to grab their lunch out of their locker if they're bringing, or they're still allowed, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're still allowed to go to their locker prior to lunch, right?
Correct.
Right. So that would also be an additional time that they would be able to make a quick contact with their parent. This is a prohibition to just contacting the parent with their student device.
But
With
isn't
a
it
personal
call
device.
or FaceTime? It doesn't prohibit text.
Correct. Call, FaceTime. You are correct.
Just Mr. Winters? Yeah.
No,
So
I
they're still allowed
understand the
to text
intent,
from
but
their locker.
we're discussing the actual wording. That's the important part, right? I understand the intent, absolutely. But the wording is students may not use their personal device to call or FaceTime. Apparently, we don't like FaceTime particularly. A parent guardian during the school day.
But how would one monitor that?
It doesn't go into that. The motion is just to strike
Doesn't
that,
that-
but you're right. We can ask.
Doesn't that
how
also
is
make it silly?
monitored?
How do you monitor it?
So, Mr. Winters, does that undercut your intent
Give him that.
if we remove that sentence?
I don't feel that it would now.
Okay.
So,
I can relay.
so Uncle Earl is
Mr.
the-
Winters said, for those on the live stream, he did not believe it would undercut his intent.
No, because as Mrs. Bauer put it, like the phones are in their lockers. And it does just say FaceTime or call.
Okay,
So I really feel like our expectations would still be in place.
okay. Yes, Ms. Cortina, by all, you're welcome too. I appreciate you.
We were together when this started.
Okay.
And just to give you sort of a idea, so sometimes they're middle schoolers and middle schoolers have drama and they will go to the bathroom with their phone when they're not supposed to and call their parents and basically say the world is ending. So we will then get calls and say, oh my gosh, there's a tragedy. So that's sort of where the piece came in with the principal's office, because the number of times I've had a parent that then after they talk with their kid wants to talk to me or wants to talk to a guidance counselor because, hey, this is going on and my kids don't have words to tell you what's happening. That was why it was put there. So that there are guidelines and parameters then for that kid to get the help that they need if they would, because you'll have them in the cafeteria screaming about something that happened in English class because they're so upset. And then the parent's like, oh my gosh, my kid's world's ending and is coming into school because they're so concerned, when really it's just a conversation that needs to be had with the kid. If that was the spirit of what happened.
No, I understand that.
It was
I
more the
did ask
safety
Dr.
thing.
Burkhart that question. He did relay that, and I didn't want to critique that necessarily, but at the same regard, I'm not comfortable with getting between a parent and their kid. And I understand your intent there is to stop that dramatic instance where they call the parent down on us. But that's a relationship between the parent, child, and the district that we're going to have to resolve, regardless of whether it's today or that phone call, right? Explaining to a child, you don't call your parent into the front office every time we say put your ruler away. I mean that's really the case that I'm probably minimizing a little bit, but at the end of the day, calling the parent in on the school, that's whether they do that when they get home and they show up the next day or that day. No.
Which is precisely the point of information that now I have to ask of you. So given that context, where they're already escalated, I'm sorry, I know. They're already escalated. They already aren't communicating effectively.
Right.
If now they only have a very, very short window in between classes or on their way to lunch or out of lunch, by your experience and estimation, will that increase that problem potentially?
So you would be surprised how many kids would come down to the office when they knew that that was the expectation. They would, and they know it's a safe place that they can go. And you sit in my chair and you shut the door and you have a conversation. So kids, that not only gives them the time that they can calm down and they get the break that they need, but it also gives them the outlet to be able to talk to parents in, like, that's not a conversation to be having in the hallway or in the bathroom or in a cafeteria.
Right, exactly. So that was the point I was getting to. If ultimately this is about them using their personal devices and limiting the amount of time that they're on their personal devices, if we're reducing it to a very, very, very short amount of time, then that sounds as though it would increase the challenges that you're navigating.
So I think by not allowing them to use the personal device, you're saying to come down to the office, which would be the appropriate way we want them to handle it. Maybe we're saying the same things?
We are.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm tired.
No, I appreciate the insight. And Dr. Burkhart has reminded me that we can release administrators if we go on longer. And I've asked him to do so. But I feel like we're at the very tail end. But I will ask you, in your estimation, should we be releasing administrators at this time?
So tomorrow, we get to welcome all of our staff back in our opening in service.
It's an
And
early day.
they need to be on point, because I'm not going to be. So I would
Yes.
ask if you would consider
Yes.
allowing them
So
to
at this
depart.
point, if administrators want to head home for their early day tomorrow, I did want to hold them for this discussion part. And for exactly what you did, Ms. Cortina, for your input, it's welcomed and wanted. So that's why I wanted to wait till at least after this. The motion's still on the table, to my solicitor's point, but I want to clear out the administrators that want to go home as as rapidly as they want to. So with that being said, any more discussion on the motion? Seeing no more discussion, roll
So
call
we're
vote.
starting over again, right?
Yes, the motion to strike.
Mrs. Bauer,
No.
Mr. Beard,
No.
Mrs. Brennan,
No.
Mr. Gelsinger,
No.
Mr. Leidy,
No.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
No.
Mrs. Weaver,
No.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Yes.
2 yes, 7 no.
All right, having been defeated that measure, I'm still going to highlight students can text their parents according to our policy. So
While it's in their locker.
while it's in their locker, yes, in the appropriate location, yes. All right, so that brings us to 8G, mental health and wellness, Ms. Brennan.
No report as of right now, but look for more information next month as school's starting.
Okay, thank you. 8H, negotiations, Mr. Gelsinger.
Nothing other than what Dr. Frill mentioned earlier. We'll be discussing that in the near future.
Okay. 8I, Safety Committee, we're currently still working on cell tower negotiations. I'll just add that. It's not negotiated by any means, but I do consider that a safety item as well. Other than that, no report. 8J, other matters for board consideration and interaction. I had in there long-term board goals development, just as a placeholder to communicate to the public. This board has developed what it considers annual goals that we should, annually every year, we should be stating to Dr. Burkhart what the board's goals for the years are, to be clear in direction that we provide the superintendent. So we've worked on that and we've discussed that. I just wanted to mention that as a point of reference that that is occurring now in our district. And with that, I will move on to 9, which is proposed August 28 agenda items. Do we have any?
Just personnel. It'll be personnel, management bills, nothing out of the ordinary at this point.
Okay.
And stay tuned. When I can get with Rob again in the next week or so, we'll figure out on when to have a separate personnel committee meeting. It probably in the middle of the day or something, like lunchtime, not to bring people out, at night, depending on
Right.
what the agenda is and what we need to do. But we'll let you know as soon as we
And after the
pick a
meeting,
date and time.
right, and after the meeting, policy committee, if you just stay behind so we can coordinate when our next policy committee meeting will be. Other than the proposed agenda items, I do want to ask, when are we next going to discuss feasibility studies?
That is in the final stages to be released. I would anticipate that going out by the end of this week for advertisement and hopefully vendors coming back with
Okay.
proposals.
Okay. Planning and discussion, do we have anything?
I just want to point out one thing I incorrectly stated. Apologies to the family about the foreign exchange. Mr. Bull gave them to me to give to you during executive session, but as you recall, executive session did become a little bit hurried, so that's not my fault. That is not Mr. Bull. I had them, they're right here. I'm sorry, apologize, but executive session did run a little long and it got a little bit, I got a little bit behind.
Been there, done that. I've had the similar situation. So, yes, with that, visitors, we had 2 people, I believe, that wanted to speak at the end of the meeting, and those are Stephen Carr.
Stephen Carr, Manheim Township. Just a few things. When you table a motion or item, it goes to the next meeting, not an hour later, according to Robert's rules. The other one was I heard a comment or 2 comments in the back on Ms. Bunty was praying, no, and no one said separation of church and state. I don't think whoever said that knows what separation of church and state means. It's not in the Constitution, and you're welcome to look it up and show it to me because it's not there. It's a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Church saying that the government would not interfere in the church, not the opposite way around. So, and whoever said that it was coercion is completely wrong. The other thing was, according to, what's your name again? Ms. Karras, right? Those books are actually pretty good books. I mean, I find nothing wrong with them, but I also agree with the board here from completely different perspective. Like, for instance, the Trail of Tears is just the Indian part. If you knew why Andrew Jackson actually did that, which is the whole reason why the Trail of Tears happened. For instance, the Indians ravaged the whites and tore off their women's heads and cut their babies out and left them there during that time. So he was trying to remove the threat from what was happening. The other part people leave out is that Andrew Jackson actually adopted one of the Indian babies up until it was dead, until it fell dead from illness. There's a lot of good things that Andrew Jackson did during the Trail of Tears. The other thing is, according to prayer, in Washington, Washington said that religion and morality are indispensable to patriotism. And Sam Adams said that the Constitution was meant for holy and religious and virtuous people. So there you have it.
Okay, Nancy Mart.
Can't read and hold at the same time. Well, we can't hear back there anyway, so it doesn't matter a lot. Sure, thanks. Thanks. Hi, I'm Nancy Mart. I am a taxpayer resident, had kids go through the district. My granddaughter's starting this year. It's very exciting. And I have written a few emails to the board. And I didn't use nasty language, but I did use adjectives that were somewhat colorful and, as I feel, precise. And the board responded by calling me cantankerous, emotionally immature, and some other things that I thought, wow, like I am a taxpayer. Found out today some of you are not, but I am a taxpayer in this district. And there's a professional sense of civil discourse. And this was why I emailed in the first place, because Mr. Galazela never says thank you to people who disagree with him. And he admitted that in the emails, that he's not going to do that. He's only saying thank you to people he agrees with. And I thought, you're in a position where you're representing the whole community, and that civility is super important. Optics are super important. And I'm going to get to that later when I talk about Mr. Vega. Full disclosure, I run a program for the YWCA. It's called Girls Loving Life. It's for a free program for girls in 2nd grade through 12th grade, just to teach them how to be confident, because we have so many factors that work against that, right? There's social media, there's girls against girls, which is crazy. There's ridiculous expectations. So free program, no agenda, just teaching girls to be confident, to be proud of who they are, take some risks, learn, all that good stuff. So in the March 27th meeting, when Mr. Galazela repeatedly, and Mr. Gelsinger did as well, and Mr. Smith, maybe not Mr. Gelsinger, sorry, maybe it was just Mr. Smith, repeatedly stated that they had received these hateful emails from members of the YWCA, I was offended. I thought, these are people that I work with. If they're sending hateful emails, I would like to know what they said. So I did a right to know request. I did a right to know request on the conversation that Mr. Smith had with Mrs. Smith, no relation, about the course that was taught. And I got those, and I had them already because I got them from Deb. And there was nothing wrong with those. The first email that Matt sent was very nice. He said, it's a great idea. Love the idea. It's great. Can I come to it? Deb said, no, it's for teachers and administrators. And that was it. No big deal. The only email that was turned over in regards to anyone else employed at the YWCA was from Justine Truxas. And it was in response to Mr. Galazela's statement, whether it was mendacious or not, I'm not really sure. But you made the statement multiple times, and you made it again tonight, and Mr. Leidy, you made it again tonight, that you've received numerous hateful emails from people from the YWCA, and yet nothing was turned over in the right to know request. So either you're being mendacious about the emails you received, or you didn't follow the letter of the law and turn those emails over. Either way, you keep bringing it up and going after the YW. I don't know what playbook you're using for that, but the YW does not have an agenda to work against the schools. It doesn't. Tonight, you said, in the dispatch article, You said that is teaching, that Mr. Vega's class is teaching kids to go to the YW and help with migrants. YW does nothing with migrants. I can bring you the charter, I can bring you the Constitution, you can look on their website. There's nothing going on with migrants. So when you keep spouting these lies and taking a community partner, because it does partner with your schools, kids get on the van after school and go to the YW for daycare, and you keep disparaging them for no real reason. I mean, your reasons are made up unless they're not, in which case you didn't follow the letter of the law. Okay, so anyway, so I just wanted to state all of that. I like that all of you said how wonderful Mr. Vega is as a teacher. And then you all basically said you don't trust him. Because if you knew the artistry, the expertise, the passion that went into his teaching, you would understand that he's not being shallow and pedantic when he's using words that are specifically chosen to get a response. So I love the fact that you're not going to ruin his course, you're not going to ruin the experience for students, because we need to stand up for students who need to know these things. Not everyone is going to stay here their whole life. They're going to move out. Just a few other quick things. The phone issue. I was a teacher for a really long time. The phone issue is not about calling parents, because I could tell you, if Miss Bunty here was in my class and she said, "Oh no, I just found out practice was canceled," I'd say, "Well, stand here and text your mom." Okay. All right. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is a response to Mr. Carr, there is case law for separation of church and state, and the whites moved into the Native American land, which is why there was conflict. They didn't just go after them. So know your history and then go ahead and speak it. Thank you very much. And thank you very much.
Does anyone else want to speak that hasn't signed in? No, I didn't see, unless we misfiled you here. This is your opportunity if you want. Yeah, it's open. Come on up. Sure, sure.
Oh, thank you. So thank you guys for acknowledging me. And for,
Name.
oh, yes. I'm Charles Connors. I am a student, senior at the high school. So thank you guys for acknowledging me today and for the great stuff you do for our district. So I encountered an issue when looking at the schedule for this school year. I know it's a little late, but the fall semester is substantially longer than the spring, like over 2 weeks longer. Fall is 96 days, which is about 19, just a little over 19 weeks, and spring is only 85, which is 17 weeks. That's 12% difference. And I found a couple reasons why this was an issue. The first was emergency closure days. Most of these are used in the first 3 months of the school year. And only two of the makeup days are in the fall. So if we have a snowstorm or something like that in late January or in February or March, then the discrepancy becomes even larger. And the other problem is the AP exams, which start on May 5th. That's more than 3 weeks before the end of school. So teachers of the first AP exams would only have about 67 days to instruct the class in the spring, as opposed to 96 in the fall. And that might not be enough time for the more content-heavy courses that still are only a semester long. And I know it's rude to identify a problem without trying to give potential solutions. So here's what I came up with to potentially help close a gap your predecessors created, if you're legally allowed to do it, because I know there's stuff with like Act 80 and in-service and stuff that I'm not totally aware of. So in lieu of the days off on February 17th and March 17th, we could remove those and just extend the end of winter break from the 1st to the 5th of January. And since March 17th is in service, we could try doing 2 half days on February 28th and March 14th. Side note, that is the date of the last cross-country total lunar eclipse until 2048. It's also Pi Day, and it's the state's birthday. It's also someone else's birthday that I know. I don't remember who. I don't know. Legends are born in March. And the in-service day on January 21st, it could be moved to the 17th. And in that case, the 2 half days would probably be the 15th and 16th instead of the 16th and 17th. And the absolute last resort nuclear option would be to take the last day of school on May 30th, make it a half day, and do it on that day instead of the 29th. And I don't know if Commissioner Wheeler called you guys back about the election, but if necessary, that could be a substitution for November 5th. That would make, and if you did all of this stuff, that would make it a 92-89 split, which is only about 3 days as opposed to like 2 weeks. That's not great, but it's closer. And I know that part of that is because MLK Day falls really late. It's January 20th instead of the 15th this year. So I know that's when the semester switch, but just a thought. Thank you guys. I'm going to take less of your time because it's 10:30. Okay. Oh, very good.
I have to acknowledge all that hard work you put into that, so I can speak on behalf of the whole board. We appreciate that.
Do you want to make a copy of it? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's we just took a picture. I don't know. He did.
All right, does anyone want to follow that? I don't think so. All right, so we're going to close public comment. This is where we have, as a board, inserted board response to be responsive to the comments, which we felt was proper. So I'm going to take this opportunity to respond to some of the comments. Ms. Mart, you very clearly identified me in several sharp critiques. I'll start and go down the list quickly, considering the hour. One, who I say thank you to is a petty critique. I decide who I'm thankful to and who I'm not. If I just thank one person, yes, and if I thank one person and not someone else, I'll get critiqued for that as well. It's a petty critique that can go both ways. So what I've decided to do is give meaning to my thank yous. If I thank you, it's because I found something you say particularly moving or illustrative that I hadn't considered before. So that's what my thank yous mean, and I reserve that right. So, right, it's not. And to your point, I will take, I reserve that remark, but I received an email on the literary award winners, and this was the first time I'd heard anyone reference that our teacher Vega is not white. I was not aware of that. I've never met him. So until this person that was advocating for literary award winners decided to make his race an issue, I had no idea, none whatsoever. But this person who was advocating for this class has apparently bought this line, hook, line, and sinker, that we should focus on race as a very important characteristic rather than what they say. So as far as prayer goes, we have decided as a board actually, that the only appropriate place for someone to pray is a person who comes here during freedoms of speech time, that they're allowed to say whatever the hell they want to say. We are not espousing their religion. They are taking a microphone and they are stating their goal, their views, and if they want to come and pray at our microphone, that is an open microphone that's protected under freedom of speech. Until, ma'am, this is agreed. It's not.
Okay. I know that I'm out of order, but I'm offended by your actions right now.
I don't
Nothing
care.
is on this agenda.
I was elected.
You're proselytizing now. Keep it to the agenda and conclude the meeting.
I am not going to close the meeting. However, I'm going to call you out of order. So please leave. Either be quiet or leave. This is not your time to speak. Public comment is closed, and that would go for both of you. That would go for both of you. I am allowed to maintain the decorum of this meeting, which you are not currently. You are speaking when you're not supposed to be speaking during the meeting. You've identified that you are unwilling to abide by the constraints of this meeting by continuing to discuss during the time frame when you're not allowed to. So I would ask you civilly to please be quiet during this meeting's, conducting this meeting's business. So I am answering all the questions if you will stop interrupting the meeting. Right to know requests which you have presented that identify me as a liar. You are falsely stating, as does the York Dispatch regularly, what we say regarding the YWCA. And again, this is not a discussion. The YWCA, as far as I'm aware of, there were trips to, under the literary award winners, to discuss migrant presentations at the YWCA. They absolutely went over there. And that was what I identified last year during that discussion. That's what I referenced that you misstated tonight. And I'm not going to get into everything because at this point, I think it is appropriate just to conclude the meeting.
I have a couple statements. You asked when the meeting ends. It ends whenever we have a motion and we have a second. That's when it ends. There was a comment made that the board did not trust Mr. Vega. I think the vote speaks differently to that. So we absolutely do support Mr. Vega. So that was another lie that was said at the microphone. And as far as the prayers, I just want to remind everybody that the meetings that the prayers were discussed in this room, we are following our solicitor's advice for the prayers. That's all I have to say.
Adjourned.
Motion.
We are adjourned at 10:34.